All stand. On your points, narration. Please be seated.
Just a few housekeeping matters, if I may.
Sure.
Might I mark for identification that the Araluen Park video that was shown, Mr. Robb's body worn video should be MFI triple P.
MFI triple P.
And the video of CW that is Mr. Robb's body worn video should be MFI triple Q.
Yes.
Ms. Walls asked me to remember a 9:30 start for tomorrow morning.
Thank
So
you.
I'll try and remember to remind everybody about it again. And just in relation to the issue that was raised by Mr. Abbott at the start of the day, our officer in charge, Superintendent Morgan, has made inquiries with those involved. As I understand it, they have declined to provide a statement, so there is no complaint that is currently with Northern Territory Police in relation to those matters. Further arrangements have been made, though, in consultation with Mr. Officer and Superintendent Morgan to ensure that Mr. Roll is comfortable and secure in leaving court today.
Sure.
I'm told there were no issues in writing.
I'm happy to leave that with the police. If there's any other issues that need to be raised in court, we can raise them. But the matter is for any investigation and how that might be conducted is with police.
Yes, Mr. Morgan has helped with arranging security afterwards, that's fine. I've said to Mr. Morgan in relation to whatever assistance is offered in relation to the investigation about that, we'll speak further with Mr. Rolfe. We've got more pressing issues to deal with this
Sure.
afternoon. Thank you.
I certainly won't complain.
Well, that's been heard and no doubt the police can follow that up with you.
Most confirmed.
Mr. Rolfe, I was asking you about Ms. Campagnaro, former officer, police officer Campagnaro. In her evidence, transcript 2759, she says that she's asked about the incident with Mr. Ryder, and as I told you before, she said that you told her you were scratched by a detective upstairs in order to make it look like there had been a use of force against you. What do you say about that?
That's incorrect.
You knew some of the detectives upstairs though, didn't you? That's your evidence so far.
When was this?
This is January 2018.
I can't say.
Can't recall.
Yeah, I knew it was later in the career that I started knowing more detectives.
When did you start knowing detectives?
I knew of them, but I definitely wasn't close with any of them until later, until the 2019 years, I think. End of 2018, 2019.
Who were the detectives that you became close to upstairs?
I'm definitely happy to write them down. Is that
Sure.
all right?
Mr. Coleridge, would you mind providing
Oh, actually, I got one up.
Oh, you got one? Great, thank you. Would you like this down? Your Honour, I'm going to ask for at least an interim non-publication order over those names, but that they be shown to my learned friends, and then there can be a discussion about that at a later date. But I accept that what Mr. Rolfe has done in writing those down is, in effect, express a concern, at least at this stage, that their names should be subject to an interim non-publication order.
Sure. I'll make an interim non-publication order in relation to MFI triple R, which are the names. I can, with similar documents from yesterday, they've been placed in a sealed envelope. This one will also be placed in a sealed envelope, but it can be, the names can be disclosed to counsel at the bar table for the purposes of these proceedings, on the understanding it's not to go further unless there's an application.
Thank you. Mr. Rob, Ms. Campagnaro says this. She's asked, were there other times in Alice Springs Police when you were there for your year where you heard of police officers covering up for each other for the excessive use of force? And her answer is yes. Yes, I did. And she's asked, did any of those involve Zach? And she says, yes, they did. She was asked whether she could remember any other specific incident that involved you other than Ryder, which involved a cover-up. And she says, I remember one involving a river, the Todd River, where he had punched someone in the river with another officer called Barclay. Do you remember that incident? Or do you know of any incident she's referring to?
No, I deny that.
In relation to the idea of covering for each other, you've already given evidence that you don't like to snitch on people. You recall that?
Yes.
And by that, you're making it pretty clear that you were a tight group of police officers and you looked out for each other.
I'm just saying that I wouldn't want to snitch on people. If I had an issue with someone, I'd take it to them probably initially.
But the court would understand you're a group of young people and older people working in a tough environment. You obviously want to have each other's back in a positive way.
Yes.
And you need to feel confident in other officers that you've got each other's back.
Yes.
But what you must have to guard against, can I suggest to you, is that becoming a bit toxic if people cover up for each other when there's been a wrongdoing.
Yes.
Can it sometimes, or did it feel sometimes like a slippery slope? That it was hard to know when to cover for someone and when to cover up?
No.
That text message with Sergeant Kirkley that I read to you, this is a genuine question I want you to reflect on.
Yes.
It's September 2019, you've been working in a tough environment for a couple of years. This bloke was your mate. He was also your sergeant. He leant on you emotionally. When he says to you, thanks for helping me sort it when I lost my shit the other night, and you reply, bro, literally no stress at all, I'm all for that shit. I've done the same thing to you more than once. I'm ready to turn my camera face, make my camera face the other way and be dramatic. In effect, you're signalling to him that you're ready to cover for him if he uses force or does something unprofessional. Is that fair?
Is that what you're signalling?
No.
And the learned friend has made a distinction between covering and covering up in her previous questions. I think it ought to be made clear to the witness that in this question she's only talking about covering and not covering up.
I think she's talking about covering up, but I agree there has been that distinction and it should be clarified.
Yes.
In effect, is this right, that in that message of the 3rd of September 2019, you're offering to cover up for Sergeant Kirkley when he was at least unprofessional?
Yes.
And the offer there in terms of covering up is to make your body-worn video camera face the other way if something happens that's unprofessional that would otherwise be caught.
Yes, and or raise my voice over
Sure.
whatever was said.
But
Yes.
the particular message I'm taking you to,
Yes.
just a common sense read of it, is that you offer to make your body-worn camera face the other way so it doesn't capture something
Yes.
that is unprofessional. Is that right? You know what I mean?
Sorry, yes.
I was asking you just before the break about the use of racist language, and this is the last time I want to bring it up with you. You've given volunteered some evidence about the use of racist language by other people, and you've admitted use of racist language yourself. When you gave evidence back in November 2022, I'm just going to paraphrase your evidence. This is when you gave short evidence the first time in this inquest. The effect of your evidence wasn't it, that you didn't see colour, you don't treat anybody differently, you treat them the same, you're not policing colour,
Yes.
you're not policing race, you're policing conduct.
Yes.
And I take it that your evidence is that that is your genuinely held belief, that you do not discriminate against people, you are only policing behaviour that people exhibit.
Yes.
But just to understand your evidence, do you accept now, with the benefit of reflection and maturity, that the use of racist language can affect your behaviour adversely?
I accept that it can, but I don't accept that it did in my instance. For me personally.
Why would you be different to other people whose behaviour can be affected by the use of
Well, I
racism?
did. Where's the evidence that other people are?
Mr. Abbott, I withdraw that. Your Honour, the answer just given by Mr. Roll is that I accept that it can, but it didn't in my case. And it's a natural question that follows. In fairness to the witness, which he well understands, why are you confident that it doesn't affect you in a way that it might affect others?
Seems to me to arise directly from the answer that's been given and also arises on other evidence that's before the court in relation to how language can ultimately inform behaviour.
I don't see what help an invited speculation about what other people do is going to assist you in your inquiry with respect to your...
He's not being asked to speculate on what other people do. He's being asked to provide us with some insight into why he believes it didn't affect him.
I've said what I want to say.
Mr. Robb, you got the text messages there. I just want to take you to a couple of them, and this is about your use of language. But before I do, can you answer that question? Why are you confident that it wouldn't affect you in a way that might affect others?
Well, I've said that I treated everyone the same, and just flicking through these pages to find the messages you're talking about, I've seen a number of messages where I call people either a white cunt or a white bitch. I would say that I've referred to white people, that I'm Caucasian more so in that regard than I have referred to any other race.
What are the messages where you call someone a white bitch?
There's 296. I've called someone a white cunt. In another, if you have the document on a computer and you just Control F and search white, just flicking through it, I've seen 2 messages where I've referred to white people that if I was of a different race, someone could say that's fairly racist.
Have a look at 295 and 296, the one that you just directed us to.
Yes.
22 June 2019, Sergeant Kirkby, same officer who you were joking about in relation to the one before that, the same officer who you had said that you were happy to make your body worn video turn face the other way. And he texts you on the 26th of June to say, hope your body warms on.
22nd of June.
22nd of June, thank you.
Text 293.
Hope your body warm on, exclamation mark. You respond, ha ha, on the whole time. I'll just pause there. That's another incident, isn't it? Where you're joking about the fact that you don't turn your body worn on sometimes, or you turn it on and off.
I believe that would have been in regard to this particular person. I believe we probably would have made... I can't say that, for example. She could have struck us as someone who was going to make a complaint.
And in those circumstances, there was, it appears, a culture that developed, at least between you and Sergeant Kirkby, and perhaps others, of just turning your body worn off there if you suspected someone might make a complaint.
No, the opposite. That's why he's saying, I hope your body worn was on the whole time.
So you're saying that in those circumstances where someone might make a complaint, you were absolutely fastidious about turning your body worn on, is that right?
Well, because now we're towards the end of 2019 where I've improved my body worn usage. Obviously, we culminate 3 months from now where I did utilise my body worn video on the night of the incident.
So do you look at that text message and know exactly what job it refers to?
Not at all.
So you're just speculating, are you, in relation to what you're joking about there about the body worn?
Yes.
You're not aware of any body worn video in relation to a particular incident that covers that date, is that right?
No, I'm not.
The exchange goes on where Sergeant Kirkby says to you, who was the silly bitch? And you reply, fuck knows, some white bitch who thinks she's Aboriginal. And he replies to you, lying in the dirt pissed, doing a fucking good impression. Sergeant Rolfe, I withdraw that, Mr. Rolfe, Sergeant Kirkby's exchange to you, who's a senior officer, I suggest to you, is extremely racist and unprofessional. Do you agree with that?
I would say yes, but I'm still being utilising this. I call someone an Aboriginal.
No, stick with my question and I'll give you every opportunity.
Yes.
Extremely racist and unprofessional. Do you agree?
Yes.
I'm suggesting to you that that was a very poor example to be set for you as a young officer in that station. Do you agree with that?
This is not a professional matter. This is a private matter. I would separate the two. And I was able to compartmentalise the two into private matters and professional matters.
Just think about this really carefully. I appreciate you don't want to snitch on your mate, but you're a young officer there. It's a sergeant you look up to, someone who lent on you emotionally during that year. He's supposed to be providing you with guidance, isn't he, as a sergeant?
Yes, which he did.
He's supposed to be setting a standard, isn't he, for you?
Yes.
He's supposed to be exhibiting what professional behaviour expectations are in Northern Territory Police, isn't he?
Yes.
And then he messages you, who was the silly bitch? And when you reply, fuck no, some white bitch who thinks she's Aboriginal, he replies, lying in the dirt, pissed, doing fucking good impression. That's an extremely poor example to have been set for you as a young officer, isn't it?
Yes.
And you use the term white bitch there, but you use it in circumstances where you're saying it's white bitch who thinks she's Aboriginal. And why did you write that?
I can't recall at the time. I imagine, I'm speculating again, because this is from past experience. Some of the things that us police officers in town are called by people in town are obviously such things like as colonisers or Captain Cook white cunts on a regular basis, which from an Indigenous person makes sense, but from a Caucasian person doesn't make sense. So perhaps she's a Caucasian person who said this, because I've had that experience as well.
You don't think that the use of terms by members of the public towards police justifies racist language, do you?
No, but again, it would normalise it.
Does it excuse it in any way?
No, just normalise it.
I think you said earlier when I asked you about the body worn that this is June 2019. You're well into the time when you were turning your body worn video on to cover jobs. Is that right?
Well, I guess I'm utilising it more.
Well, 6 days later, there's a matter involving Antonio Woods. Do you recall that?
No.
Asked you accepted that you did not turn your body worn video on for that matter. Would it surprise you to know?
No, I'd accept that.
In relation to some of the messages, have a look. I'm just asking you about yours because I'm going to ask you to reflect on them at the end of these questions. If you wouldn't mind turning up 209. This is an exchange with Officer Sykes. He was then another constable, is that right?
Yes.
He joined the Northern Territory Police after being in the military for a while. Is that right?
Yes.
He was a mate of yours before he joined up?
Yes.
And you encouraged him to come down to Alice, is that right?
Yes.
Is he still a mate today?
Yes.
And he texted you in April 2019. Heard you had a rough arvo yesterday. Grubby fucks. And then there's something about equipment. And you reply, nah brah, just slightly annoying, ha coons man. So there's the use of that language which you've admitted had been used.
Yes.
And at that stage, it was well and truly normalised between yourself and other young constables, including Officer Sykes.
I wouldn't say it's normalised at all. That is the one time I've said that word in the entirety of my messages, which I believe could reach up to approximately 20,000 messages in these exchanges.
But it's not the entire time, it's not the entirety of the time that you used that language while you were a serving police officer in the police force, in the station, is it?
Where's the evidence of that?
No, I'm just asking you.
No. Oh, this is the only time I've said that.
It's the only time you've texted it, and that means it's the only time you've ever said it. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't say that word. It's there's no excuse for saying it. I'm sorry, I've said it.
Sergeant Barnes used that term in a text message with you, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
There's a text at 241, if you look at that, please. This is from May 2019.
Before we go on, can my learned friend confirm that this is the only occasion
Well,
in these text messages, or?
Well,
I mean,
Mr Abbott has access to the brief in the same way that I do, and so he's free to do Control F search as well. The question I asked was whether or not Mr Rolfe used that term outside the text message.
Well, first of all, you asked inside the text about the text messages, and he told you this is the only time.
and
Now, you know, I wouldn't like the impression to be given that there's something else. He said there's 20,000 of these text messages. We've only got a small selection here. This
no,
cherry
you've
picking.
got the entirety of the text messages. A lot of work was done to identify those which might be used by any of the council, and that
I've been given 115 pages of text messages. That's it. I
Yes.
haven't seen the other 20,000.
well, they're in the brief.
Mr Rolfe, I just want to take you to one other term, 241. It's a text message to a member of your family, do you see that?
Yes.
And you say halfway down the page, you're talking about how tough it is for you in the job at that moment.
Yes.
And you say, I know it'll get better, it's just a moment in time and I'm being a pussy. I'm sure I work a lot harder than most people. Just don't get why all that work has got me to the point where it's my job to look after Neanderthals who drink too much alcohol. Ha ha. By Neanderthals, you were referring to the Aboriginal people who you policed.
No.
You were referring to Aboriginal people you arrested, is that right?
No.
Who do you say that you were referring to when you used the term Neanderthals?
I was referring to the entirety of the population, regardless of race, who I considered drink too much alcohol at that time. And I was dealing with
You didn't regard that term as racist, is that right?
no. I'm not using it in regard to
You
race.
sounded genuinely surprised there. Are you serious that you're suggesting that you did not intend to be racist there? Is that right?
Yes, I'm not using that term in regard to any particular race. I use that term a lot to
Sorry, I
general.
just didn't hear the words.
I use that term a lot in general, sorry.
Thank you.
In what other context would you use that?
I've got a few mates who are a bit meathead gym guys, I call them that. Non-Indigenous they are. So we use that term a lot. We use it a lot in the army and stuff. We just use that word.
I took you to the text at 295. You understood full well when you were having that exchange with Sergeant Kirkby that it was intended as a racist slur against Aboriginal people when you texted Sergeant Kirkby at 296 in response to him asking you who was the silly bitch, fuck knows, some white bitch who thinks she's Aboriginal.
No.
You didn't understand that to be a racist slur?
No, no, this is how I explained it before.
Right, well when he texted you back lying in the dirt pissed, doing a fucking good impression, you certainly understood that to be racist, didn't you?
Yes.
In your opinion piece in the NT Independent in February 2023, you seem outraged that the private messages are even being brought up in this inquest. Is that fair?
Yes.
And that's the thrust of your evidence yesterday, that, correct me if I'm wrong, please, that you are still angry that your private messages have been exposed in this inquest. Is that right?
Yes.
I want to ask you, putting that aside, when you are reminded of these messages and the racist exchanges that went between you and other officers, what is your reflection about your own conduct?
I should have done better, and there are definitely words and themes that I should not have used at all, and I should have done better in certain incidences.
As in, I should have done better and not used this racist language in text exchanges? Do you accept
Oh,
that?
yes.
And you should have done better and not used the racist language in exchanges in the police station?
I've never said that I've done that.
Did you yourself use any racist language in Alice Springs Police Station?
Not that I can recall,
So it wasn't you, it was just other people in the station, is that right?
as far as I can recall.
So your evidence is that there were plenty of police officers using racist language openly in the police station, but not you, not Sergeant Bowens, and not Sergeant Kirkby, even though you were texting with those officers,
Yes.
even though you were texting racist messages with those officers.
Yes.
I suggest to you, Mr. Rolfe, that that is not correct.
Well, I
That is
object.
not true.
I object to this. Where's the evidence in this hearing that you've already received from someone, apart from Ms. Cameron,
Why
That he was- that he
why
was
should there be
using
evidence
racist-
apart from Miss Campagnaro?
where's the evidence that he was using racist language in the police station,
Well,
Alice Springs?
You've already identified one witness who said that he was.
Yeah, and the objections to her evidence are many, and obviously they'll be made in terms of submissions. But there's no one else who doesn't come with Miss Campagnaro's baggage, who's given evidence, who said that he's used racist language in the police station. And I want to make it clear that I know of no evidence, and if my learned friend has evidence from someone else in this inquiry that's gone on for years, as to him using racist language in the police station, let me hear about it.
Your Honour, it's abundantly clear, as Your Honour has identified, that Ms Campagnaro gives evidence that a number of officers were using racist language in the Alice Springs Police Station. One of them was Mr Rolfe, another was Sergeant Bowens, and another was Sergeant Kirk. Mr Rolfe, I'm giving you another opportunity to reflect on it. Is it possible that you used racist language at any time openly in the Alice Springs Police Station?
No, I don't think I did.
You say to Her Honour that Her Honour should accept your credibility in that regard and not Ms Campagnaro's.
Well, that's a matter for, that's not a
It
proper
is.
question to put.
I would draw it.
Thank you.
You suggest to you, Mr Rolfe, that you should be believed when you say to Her Honour that you did not use racist language. Is that right?
I'll give up.
I think he's giving evidence
I withdraw
under
it.
oath.
Sure.
When Officer Hanson gave evidence about this, he acknowledged a sense of shame in the use of these text messages. Have you read his evidence?
Yes, I have.
Did you listen to him give evidence?
No.
His evidence includes this at transcript 2701. He's asked, do you think there's an important lesson here for other police officers that you'll be able to pass on? This is one of the reflections he gives about the racist language. He says, I've had, just in the last couple of days since coming to Alice, I've had some pretty wholesome conversations with some of the guys that I work with back there. And it's been quite encouraging because, the other guys have seen what I'm going through and they're looking at it going, man, even I've reflected, and it feels good. Although I'm deeply offended by my own conversations, the growth that I've got from this is sort of like, it's a little bit invaluable. Something that I can, it's experience I can pass on to my young fellow, and it gives me experience in owning my mistakes, I guess. And that's seen by other members I work with, and they're doing the same thing without me prompting them, which is awesome. So the question I've got for you, having had the opportunity to listen to that evidence, is are you offended also by your own conversations?
What conversations?
By your own racist conversations?
He hasn't said he's had racist
The
conversations.
text messages.
Oh, text messages, that's one thing. Conversations are another.
Are you offended, Mr. Rolfe, by your own exchanges in your text messages?
I don't know if me being offended is the right word, but yes, I feel a sense of shame and definitely regret. And shame's probably a better word than offence. In that regard to my personal offence.
Has
That
it
makes sense.
resulted in any reflection and growth on your part, do you think?
Yes.
In what regard? Is there anything else you want to tell Her Honour about that before I move on?
No, I'm happy to move on.
Around April 2019, I think you booked in for the Rome Close Protection course in South Africa, is that right?
Yes.
What were you hoping that would help with?
I just wanted to do a course and upskill myself. As I'd said previously, it was difficult to get on courses in Alice Springs. It was difficult to get in courses because the police courses were run in Darwin.
Okay. Were you ready to quit the police force by that stage, do you think?
No.
Did you think that it might assist in keeping up your skills for the TRG, for example,
Yes.
and help you progress in the organisation in that respect?
Yes.
If you could have a look, please, at text 242. You message a family member to get the phone number of Ben Roberts-Smith,
Yes.
which you had previously, and you just wanted it to be sent again, is that right?
Yes.
You wanted to ask him if he, quote, knows of any actual good private work going at the moment.
Yes.
And your plan at that stage was to, I'm quoting from you, just going to try and find the most wild work to do all around the world, I guess.
Text 248.
Sorry. Yes.
Does that refresh your memory, or does that indicate that in fact you did want to leave the force at that time?
Yes, that refreshes my memory, and I guess if there was a better option elsewhere, then I'd be willing to leave.
And a better option might be doing private contract work overseas in what sort of way?
Depending on the job. I'm not sure, but yeah, it would just depend on the job.
Well, 249, you'll see there's a message that you sent to Ben Roberts-Smith,
Yeah.
and halfway down it says, I'm at work at the moment. I was going to see if you were free sometime for a chat about some work. I'm heading over SA soon for that Ronin course, mainly just for shits and giggles, but yeah, policing's good, but it's not going anywhere, and I need some wild times badly. And he says, 250, understand mate, and happy to chat. I have a few different contacts running contracts out of Kabul, Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq and Libya, Africa. We'll be able to connect you with the right people, and doing the Ronin course will add value to your CV. And your response at 251 is, that'd be wicked. I know it sounds dumb to some people, but you'd get it. I just want some dangerous shit, in brackets, while being professional, ... TRG will happen at some point. I've already passed, just waiting for a spot, but they're about to run a new course and they're going to pump a few girls through. So with the new diverse world, those girls will take priority over me. So I've got time to do other stuff. And he writes back, all good. Let's chat next week and I'll give you some insight. That's 252. So it's pretty clear, isn't it, from that exchange that what you were interested in at that time was still the high adrenaline, exciting stuff that you could get from the Northern Territory Police Force on a small number of occasions, and that you wanted elsewhere.
Yes.
Who were the donut boys that are referred to in some of these messages?
That's just me and my mate that we like to eat donuts sometimes.
Is that Sykes and Hanson and Kirkby, or
Just me and Sykesy.
you did jobs, did you, with Sykes in the force?
Yes.
If you have a look, please, at 298. You see there a blurred image, can I ask you to accept, and you probably checked it, that that's for body-worn video footage, is that right?
Yes.
Is that body-worn video footage of a home invasion that you attended?
Yes.
And it was one where you explained that home invasion a little bit more at text 300. You'd sent the video, it's pretty clear, from 299 to your mother and father,
Yes.
and with the text Mark and I kicking indoors and then YEWWWW, which indicates that it was high adrenaline, high octane, is that right?
I guess yes.
And then you text your parents, home invasion, dude's broken in with a knife to attack the victim and locked himself in the bathroom. The offenders got away with murder before, but dropped the knife before we got him the door, I think it's supposed to mean. I'm the point man and can hear my voice. We've been having a sweet time. Mark and I have been working together the last week and got so many high priority targets. It's good for Mark, so he already has a sweet rep. And the response is at 301, awesome work, darling. I love the cameo of Mark at the end. And then response from your dad, the donut boys strike again, with an exclamation mark, etc. So it was, in effect, you texting your parents celebrating that high adrenaline, high octane work.
I think I was just bragging, unprofessionally bragging about this one particular incident that was, from a policing sense, done well, but it was just unprofessional bragging.
You were still a young bloke at that time, relatively young.
Yes.
And you've acknowledged that was unprofessional. With the benefit of maturity, you can see that more clearly now, is that right?
Yes, definitely.
But you understood, didn't you, that it was a breach of the rules that you were
Yes.
subject to? You sent the body-worn video footage, I think you've acknowledged this previously, but to a number of other people as well, is that right? I'll give you an example just because
I'll accept. Yeah.
I'll just double check whether I need to use initials for this. Just have a look at 354 us if you don't mind. There's somebody by the name of NK, is that a police officer?
No.
So that's another example of a civilian who you're sending that video to.
Yes.
Again, it's unprofessional bragging about the high adrenaline, high octane work, is that right?
I definitely agree with the first part, but I'm not sure if I agree with the second part, but the level of, but about the job.
Okay,
Yes.
unprofessional, but why are you sending it to that person?
Because in that instance, I guess it's a good, it's a good example of the tactics of clearing a house, and I unprofessionally, immaturely thought my mate would appreciate it.
Is he someone you've been in the army with?
Yes.
I took you earlier to an exchange or a number of exchanges about your frustration in relation to the TRG. You had 4 deployments with the IRT in 2018, 4 in 2019 before the 9th of November, and I think you already conceded you were getting very frustrated that other people were getting into the TRG before you, and you regarded it as an unfair selection process. Is that a fair summary?
I regard it as not based on merit.
Not based on merit.
Yes.
One of the messages that you send, it's text 260 if you want to have a look at it, is you to Constable Hanson.
So what number is that?
260. And you say, bro, did you hear BB pass TRG? What a fucking joke. Her and 2 others. And you're referring there, we redacted the name, but to another constable who was actually a friend of yours, wasn't he?
Yes.
And you had less respect for her tactical skills than your own?
Yes, I'd done some, she's an amazing cop, amazing person. She'd done some training with us to attempt to, I guess, pre-training in regard to trying out for TRG. Mitch Hansen at that point, I don't believe, had passed TRG selection. He'd attempted one selection and wasn't. So you do the initial 2 day, then you do the firearms week. Generally, firearms week, a big fail point is safety or trainability. I guess in my knowledge of comparing the two, this is just based on my opinion, and I'm also supporting Hansen, is that he should have, if she's passed, his tactics or his skills and trainability will probably be at a higher level. And in that regard, that probably explains it.
All right, you're a young bloke, you've only been there a couple of years. Appreciate that you're impatient and you're frustrated, but it was unprofessional to message another police officer being critical of another female officer for getting into TRG in that regard.
So she passed the selection. I guess my frustrations at that point was, and mentioned in the previous message before, it was my belief now that the selection process would favour a woman over me. That was my belief at the time. I don't think it was sent privately, because if I said it publicly, then yes, it would, or in a professional sense, it would be unprofessional, but it was sent privately.
Did you start to did you, looking back on it, develop an attitude which was disrespectful to a number of the women in your workplace?
No.
Have a look, please, at text 353. Do you see there an image that you sent to Constable Hansen
Yes.
of, I did once know where that was from, but it's from a particular,
Which judge was that?
I think it's from Batman.
from Batman,
Yeah.
353. And it's a photo of, I don't know, how would you describe it, Mr. Roll?
I think it might be De Niro or something playing the Penguin.
Okay. So it's a Batman movie, it's De Niro playing the Penguin.
Or I might be wrong, but it's someone playing.
DeVito.
DeVito.
Danny DeVito playing the Penguin. The point is, it's a fat or rotund characterisation of an ugly character, and the message that you send is literally 50% of the women at our work, and then girls shaped like this talk the most shit is on that meme.
Well, I object to this. What's the point of all this?
Well, there's going to be a question about it, and it's to do with disrespectful attitudes to women.
Well, he should be put to him, no disrespectful attitude towards women. And now this is being put to him as though somehow...
It's being challenged. He said he did not develop a disrespectful attitudes to women at work, and now it's being suggested through his text messages that challenging that answer, given that he said 50%, literally 50% of the women at work, girls shaped like this talk the most shit.
Well, what's that got to do with the death that you're investigating?
I can answer that question. On the 9th of November, there's an issue which my learned friend must know about in relation to instructions that were given by a female
This is Ms. Frost we're
Bush.
talking about.
police officer, community police officer, called Sergeant Frost. I'm asking Mr. Rolfe about his attitudes to women in the event that they affected his ability to take instruction or his communication with Sergeant Frost on the 9th of November.
Well, I object to this.
I press the question.
Yes, in my view, attitudes to women that developed either may or may not have developed in Alice Springs Police Station or may not have developed in relation to Mr. Rolfe are relevant to the issues in investigation in this inquest.
May it please the court. Mr. Rolfe, does it fairly represent how you felt about 50% of the women in your work?
No, again, I am talking rubbish. I respect women a great deal on a base-by-base basis, nothing to do with their gender. I do have a judgmental attitude to overweight police regardless of gender. I think it puts you at a risk in certain areas to the public, and I guess I have a high level of expectation of police officers to perform their duties.
So the point of sending that was to be critical of 50% of the women at your work because they were overweight, is that right?
I think it's a lot of shit talk. Unless we line out all the women at the Alice Springs station, I can't say 50%, that's just an exaggeration, but there seemed to be, potentially I was working with a few police officers who are overweight.
And you're shit talking about your colleagues in a text exchange with another young police officer. What do you think about that now?
Again, I think private conversations like this are a way in which people vent.
Do you think it might have been a reflection of your attitude to those officers when you were with them? In terms of a lack of respect for them?
In regard to overweight police officers, I held that attitude. It put people at risk sometimes.
You were, I take it, in that regard, evaluating their tactical skills or their ability to engage when you say people at risk?
Not necessarily. The best example would be up Mount Gillen where you could run up it. Years back, just before the incident at some point, a young Alice Springs doctor, I believe he was only in his 30s, had hiked up Mount Gillen and he'd called up the police and knew he was having a heart attack coming on. 2 police attended. One of the police officers couldn't leave the car park to make the trek up the Mount Gillen because he was too overweight, and that would end up with a second casualty. The other police officer wasn't fit either. He got up to Mount Gillen. By the time he got up to Mount Gillen, a 18 or 19-year-old girl was conducting CPR on the doctor. The doctor had found this young woman, and given her instructions before he lost consciousness. The other police officer was according to the report, was too puffed to conduct CPR, and the police officer that should have helped this young woman out stood there while this young woman kept doing CPR. This is what I'm talking about when it's putting people's lives at risk.
Mr. Roth, you go on to text Constable Hanson. Just have a look at the following exchange. It appears that Constable Hanson, as he was then, was at Borroloola.
Yes.
On the 12th of July, he messages you when in response to you asking if Borroloola's going all right. Yeah, been a bit hectic. The cops out here have fucked this town. They've been letting the N-word drink wherever they want, ha ha. Senior Constable Hanson's already given evidence about that text message. He's apologised profusely. He's reflected on it deeply. Your response to it is, bush cops are fucking shithouse. He says, ha ha, got the photo. And then your response on the 12th of July is, girls and bush cops all disgust me, ha ha. Even accepting you are just shit talking with another colleague. What do you think about that on reflection in terms of it? Did it accurately reflect your attitude to a substantial number of the female police you were dealing with?
Not at all. That's why I'm saying it's shit talk. I've said similar things about generalisations about all men.
Do we find in any of these exchanges anything about literally 50% of the men at our work with that a similar photo?
I'd have to.
And bush cops or just boys and bush cops all disgust me. Ha ha.
If we went to my 20,000 messages and I controlled F'd, I'm sure I could find some large generalisations about men.
Well, no doubt that there'll be an opportunity in re-examination for that to happen.
There's been every opportunity for any additional text messages to be added to those that have been extracted, but anyway.
Well, the opportunity we got was an opportunity before this cross-examination.
Sure,
So,
and the opportunity
so now the opportunity is
continues.
still being given, and we'll consider it. So I wouldn't like people to think that we've had the opportunity, not done anything, and there are no messages, because we'll examine the 20,000 text messages in accordance with my client's wishes, and probably tend to some more to make the picture complete.
Well, I think that invitation has been extended on a significant number of occasions and repeated on a number of occasions, as Mr. Officer is well aware and will no doubt be able to assist Mr. Abbott.
And the offer remains open, as Mr. Abbott
Thank you, Your Honour.
identifies.
in relation to your attitude to bush cops and the way in which it was shared with other officers, I've taken you to a couple of messages, but you see them again here, don't you?
Yes.
At 360 and following, where Constable Hanson says no need for FOMO, they don't want us to police properly. You say, fuck up, the loser's taken over. He refers to a particular police officer at 362. I take it that that person's a police officer, is that right?
I believe so.
TM.
I believe so.
And that person, I don't think there's a name, but let's
I just don't know.
I'll use the acronym, sure. It's 362. She was a sergeant of police, is that right?
I don't think I don't know.
The message sent to you by Officer Hanson is Tanya Mace is here and doesn't want us to, quote, ruin the community by getting them offside. And you respond back, damn man, that's shit. And it's pretty clear from that exchange, isn't it, that what you understood was that Constable Hanson had been told by the sergeant there in the community, you need to not go too hard. You need to make sure that we maintain good relationships with the community. Is that what you understood by that message?
I understood that to go a little bit further than that and potentially be to the point where you need to ignore certain laws being broken as the priority.
I'm told that her rank at that time was a senior sergeant. Do you accept that in that exchange there is an expression of contempt, or at least I'll withdraw the word contempt. There is an expression of a lack of respect for the important role of a senior sergeant in the community?
I would take that there's a lack of respect in her, ruling to them in that certain incident, but I wasn't there.
Do you think, looking back on it, and the young man that you were then as an officer, and accepting how impatient you were and enthusiastic and confident in your own skills, that is an example of exhibiting arrogance towards another, or arrogance in the situation?
Well, I didn't send that message.
Sure, but you engaged in it with another police officer where he's saying that this senior officer there, she was a senior sergeant, doesn't want to ruin the community by getting them offside, and you replied, damn man, that's shit.
Well, I object because it's not clear from your question as to who he's determined should be exhibiting arrogance. The question is, is he claiming that he exhibited arrogance? That's one thing.
Thanks, Mr. Abbott. That's what I'm asking you to clarify. Do you think that it reflected your arrogance in having that exchange with Officer Hanson?
I don't know.
Do you think it reflected a lack of understanding that you had at that time, in July 2019, about the important role that is played by officers on the ground in community?
I'd had a number of very good interactions and deployments to Borroloola with the previous OIC of the station out there.
Who was that person?
Her name was, I believe, Melissa Sanderson. So we engaged with her very well, and IRT worked with her extremely well, and I believe we got fairly glowing reports from the rank for our work up in Borroloola. So I'd seen how she had worked. I appreciated how good police work could be done out there. Obviously, everyone is an individual, and I think has to be taken on an individual situational basis.
Let me ask you this. This is the actual communication there is Constable Hanson saying to you that Senior Sergeant is here and she doesn't want us to, quote, ruin the community by getting them offside. And you replied, damn man, that's shit. Do you think that exchange reflects a lack of understanding by you at that time of the importance of community engagement?
I think it's reading in a bit too deep into it. I think from knowing myself and knowing Mitch, I believe we're talking about potentially, because I understand what you're saying, but I don't think that's what this message is about. I think he's complaining about the fact that they were instructed nearly to not uphold the law in the preference of having some members of the community happy with them.
All right. Do you think that it reflects a lack of understanding by you at that time, that there might be a good reason why you let some things slip so that you engage the community and can deal with the bigger picture issues?
I agree with that in community you may let some things slip. I would imagine that Mitch isn't talking about those small offences.
Do you think at that stage that you lacked a proper appreciation of the importance of the role of community police?
Look, I don't think so. No.
I want to take you to the end, towards the end of 2019. One of the messages towards the end of 2019 is one I've already taken you to. It's at 4:26. The exchange begins, and I don't need to go back to the whole of it. But on that's the start of the conversation with Sergeant Kirkby in these texts, where you say, I'm putting in for the TRG spot again, 90% chance I won't get it. They're prioritising applicants with bush time. Or other applicants have got bush time.
Yes.
But I've got to put the paperwork in anyway. And so it's even by this stage, you're still frustrated by not getting into the TRG. You think it's probably pretty hopeless given that you've been overlooked beforehand, or at least there's a good chance you won't get it.
Yes.
And Sergeant Kirkby says, true, you've got to put the paperwork in. How does the bush time put your application ahead? It doesn't. It's just an arbitrary decision made by the bosses. And you write back, ha ha, I know, they're fucking idiots, prioritising lads that go out bush so they can be lazy and do no work. I mean, that's certainly an expression by you to Sergeant Kirkby that you think at that stage the people who go out bush are doing it so that they can be lazy.
I object to this. We've had all this before. We've been through this.
I just asked.
I don't believe we've been to this text.
No, we haven't. And I just asked Mr. Rolfe about his attitude towards community police and whether it reflected a lack of understanding. So I just want to remind you about this text message and give you an opportunity to reflect on it. Do you think, looking back and reminding yourself of that text message, that you had a lack of understanding and appreciation about the importance of work?
I don't concede that only because I know that I'm talking shit. This is a private message. I am aware, I am intelligent enough to know that when I speak about something so general like bush cops, I don't know every single bush cop. I know a extremely low number. And my involvements with bush police, and I'm intelligent enough to know that this is where this generalisation venting attitude comes from. My only involvements with bush police, I believe, maybe at all, was when they had needed assistance off us to help them with part of their job. So obviously no bush police is going to email Constable Rolfe and say, hey man, just letting you know we're so busy and this is how good we're doing it at our job. So I'm only getting negative interactions, if that makes sense.
Isn't that the point, Mr. Rolfe, that you didn't have the opportunity to work in community or to get to know community police or to understand the pressures of their job or to understand all the good work they did with the community engagement?
Yeah,
And
correct,
so
but
it's a lack
I
of
know that.
understanding.
Correct, I knew that I didn't have that. So this is just, it's meaningless.
To be fair on you, you're exchanging messages with a sergeant who's supposed to be in a position of mentorship. And his view is that it was stupid or not necessary for there to be any bush time that helped your TRG. So he's backing you up, isn't he? And saying that's nonsense that the bosses are requiring bush time for TRG.
Yes, he's saying it's just an arbitrary decision.
And did that feed into your thinking in relation to
I object to this feed into thinking. The only purported relevance of this is because eventually we'll get to Ms. Frost and some directions that she, as a so-called bush officer, gave on the evening of the 9th of November, or the day of the 9th of November. That's the purported relevance. How does that question have anything to do with the answer to what might be coming when eventually we get on to the events that were much more proximate to the death that you're inquiring into?
Well, it's relevant to whether or not management were encouraging, or some part of management were encouraging those views.
Management were encouraging the view.
Sergeants.
He's been asked what he thinks about it.
Would you like the question again, Mr. Robb?
No, I don't think Sergeant Kirkby's views in any way confounded my views. My views in that regard were my own, and he just, looks like had the same view. I think that was the question.
Okay, so he obviously shared your view.
Yes.
And that's the same day that you go on to have that text exchange where he thanks you for helping him sort out the shit when he, sorted out when he lost his shit the other night.
Yes.
And you say, I'm ready to make my camera face the other way and be a dramatic cunt for the film.
Yes.
And the Oscar goes to, and you're laughing about, or your response at 433 is ha ha.
Yes.
Immediately after that incident, do you see on the 4th of September, you send a message to your mum and dad saying another good comment from a Sarge. Maybe the OIC and Super will sign off this year, ha ha. And you're talking about the OIC and Super signing off on that comment or on the TRG?
The TRG app, I believe.
If you look very carefully, can I suggest to you, might be familiar to you, that you see the word Paul Kirkby, the sergeant at 434, as the one who wrote that commendation?
Sorry, I can't read my document at all.
Can I ask you to accept from me that we can see the word Paul Kirkby, and I'll be corrected if I'm wrong?
I accept that if you've got a better version than me.
Let me put that on the screen, please, Ms. Walls, 434. Ms. Walls will hand you the screen just so that we don't mess with the live stream.
And sorry, may I, clarification, I can take it the words, another good comment from A Sarge. The A Sarge is a reference to Mr. Kirk.
That's how I read this
Thank you.
entry. This is how I read it, holding it away from my face so that I can. It says, words to the effect of, it's clearly marked in the supervisor named Paul Kirkby, Sergeant. Constable Rolfe started on patrol group in Alice Springs and took on a leadership role or style amongst his colleagues. Constable Rolfe's decision making is decisive and guided by legislation and policy. Constable Rolfe's firework is always completed in a timely manner and to a high standard. He carries himself with pride and always looks professional when in uniform. As per Constable Rolfe's comments about his IRT work, it may be best to contact Sergeant Lee Bowens for an up-to-date and accurate assessment on the mobile provided. Constable Rolfe is proactive and enthusiastic in arresting outstanding offenders, etc. I find it difficult to read the rest. That's a comment from Sergeant Kirkby. It won't surprise you that he wrote those comments, is it?
No, I would have seen them before, yes.
And those comments are sent literally the day after he's had the exchange with you where he says, sorry about the stress caused by losing my ship the other night, stress you didn't need, you sorted it well, I just had enough. He was the second person to press my button that night. And you replied, bro, there was literally no stress, I'm all for that shit. I've done the same thing to you more than once before. I'm always ready to make my camera face the other way and be a dramatic cunt for the film. But he's talking you up on your commendation as being professional and always ready to abide by the standards and being someone who should advance in the organisation. But in fact, you and Sergeant Kirkby engaged in conduct that was unprofessional together.
Yes, we did.
I asked you this earlier. I used a different term, but you and that sergeant were involved in a number of jobs where there was aggressive arrests. Is that fair?
I would need to be shown the actual
All right,
jobs.
just have a look at, if you don't mind, at text 439. Just go back earlier. After you send that to your parents, there's no criticism in this, the response from your mum is great comments, darling, fingers and toes crossed, etc. And your reply to her at 439 is, yeah, me and that Sarge stomped heads together, ha ha. What did you mean by that?
Again, I am talking shit. I would say we were effective at the job together. If there was an instance where force was necessary, I would say me and that sergeant would be effective in that job if required.
In early September, you found out you missed out on the TRG spot. Do you recall that?
No.
Just have a look at text 445, that'll remind you of that. And you text Constable Hanson, P.S. I didn't get the TRG spot.
Yes.
And you text 449, yeah man, fucking joke.
Yes.
When are you back at work? Need you back to help temper the storm. What do you mean by that?
I can't recall. Potentially just the workload.
On the 24th of September 2019, you and Constable Kirstenfeld located a man outside the Todd Tavern and began questioning him in relation to an escape from custody. Do you recall that?
Yes.
You said previously, I think, that Constable Kirstenfeld is a good mate.
Yes.
Ex-army.
Yes.
Right? Someone you respect and respected.
Yes.
Is he someone who was known to be a bit loose in the force?
He would speak in a loose manner. I'm not aware of any of his loose dealings, but he would definitely speak in a way that a lot of people would find potentially crude.
And could he speak in a manner to the people that you were arresting in a way that was rude and abrasive?
He could speak that way to anyone.
Might we watch that video, please? It's a Todd Tavern. That should come on your screen in front of you as well. I'm just pause there if you don't mind, Court Officer. So, MFIYY is the body worn video footage of the Todd Tavern, and I asked it to be played. Was it a tactic that you used in the police force to often to race after an offender and push them from behind or from the side?
It was a tactic to, if an offender was to run away from us, to chase them and use the minimum force required to apprehend them, yes.
Or a suspected offender, I should say, someone that whether you knew they were an offender or not.
Yes.
And in this instance, you know, don't you, that this was someone, you were out looking for a particular person.
Yes.
You had a photograph of that person on your phone, is that right?
Yes.
And you held the photo up to their face, is that right? To the man's face,
Yes.
trying to identify them. And
Yes.
then what happened?
He ran.
And then you ran after him, and we see exactly what happened afterwards depicted on your body worn video, is that right?
Yes.
And you pushed that man over in the way that we can see there.
Yes.
And then you understand he broke his arm, is that right?
No.
He suffered an injury as a result, is that right?
He had a sore shoulder
Did he get taken to hospital, is that right?
and released a very short time later. If you have medical records, you can prove me wrong, but as far as I was aware, he just had a sore shoulder.
He was put in a sling when he was in hospital, you're aware of that?
Yes.
Are you mocking that? Are you suggesting that he didn't hurt himself, in fact, from that push that we see?
No, I'm just suggesting that you might be putting in or implying something that didn't occur.
Okay. Let's just put it as he had a sore arm or shoulder and was put in a sling. You accept that?
Yes.
The chase went from outside the Todd Tavern on Wills Terrace to outside Sporty's restaurant, about 250 metres away.
Yes.
The man appeared to slow down, didn't he, outside of Sporty's restaurant?
That or I sped up.
And around that time you struck him with your outstretched hand and that caused him to fall into a fence outside Sporty's.
Well, I object to
Is that
strike. I object to categorising this as an assault. In my submission, is completely wrong. In the course of his
struck with
duty,
your
in
outstretched-
apprehending an offender, he pushed this man to stop him running.
We just use a neutral term that you used your right arm that connected with his body.
You used your right arm and connected with his body, is that right?
Yes.
And he then fell into what?
What that flag? What we saw it. I don't know how to describe that.
He fell into a fence outside Sporty's, is that what it looked like to you?
Yes.
And he suffered or he complained of an injury to his arm because of that use of force. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
And he was taken to hospital.
Yes.
And in fact, that man was not somebody who was the offender you were looking for. You got the wrong person.
He was not the offender we were looking for, but he did commit an offence.
He wasn't the offender. What was the offence you committed?
I believe he provided false name, false ID.
You're saying that would justify you running after him and pushing him with your outstretched arms, causing him to fall over into that fence?
That use of force was justified and was cleared.
Well, it was cleared, but are you suggesting that was just wholly justified, that use of
So
force?
it was found not to be sufficient to be established. Not
Well, that's a matter for submission. But my client's given his evidence. If you want to ask him questions about it, you'll have
Yeah,
to
well,
return.
yeah, sure.
Mr. Rolfe, it turns out it was the wrong guy in terms of the person you were looking for, isn't it?
Yes, it wasn't the person we were looking for.
Were you concerned that in fact he'd sustained an injury or complained of an injury and was put in a sling as a result of the arrest that you had effected?
Yes, so he was taken to hospital and we made the decision not to arrest him or charge him for providing a false name, which we were well in our right to do so. And I believe he was very happy with the outcome.
Mr. Rolfe, you tried to identify somebody by using a phone, holding it up to their face, and you effectively, in doing that, did you identify that person?
No, I believed it was the person in the photograph, as did my sergeant who had called us down to that location and my partner.
Who was the sergeant who called you down?
I believe his name is Wade Pahi.
And who was the partner who you were with on that occasion?
I believe that was Jimmy Kirstenfeld.
And you held the phone up to his face. As a result of that, it's apparent he ran. Is that clear? you agree with that?
You ask him why he ran.
He ran at a time you were holding that photo up to his face, correct?
Yes, I believe he glanced at the photo and then ran.
And turns out that wasn't the person that you were looking for at all, was it?
Well, this is the third time this has been asked.
Just answer
The
the
third
question
time.
so that we can move on is what I'm asking for.
Well, I object
He's
to-
already agreed that it wasn't the person.
So it wasn't the person, and then he complained of an injury as a result of being pushed over in the manner we see depicted in the body-worn video footage, and he was taken to hospital.
That's the third time you've asked that.
Yes.
Were you concerned that the person you had detained, who wasn't in fact the person you were looking for, had suffered an injury, or at least was complaining of an injury?
Well, ideally in use of force or ideally in any arrest, that there's not going to be an injury. That sometimes can't be prevented.
We see that, what we see and what I've just shown is in fact an example of you recording body-worn video on your phone in breach of police regulations, isn't it?
Yes.
And then you sent that video to a family member, did you?
Yes.
Have a look then at 480.
Yes.
And what you say there on the 25th of September 2019, the main chase body worn is mine, haha, treated him to the old illegal shoulder charge. Because I wear body armour, I'm not as rapid as the locals initially, but they still can't outrun me. Turns out the dude wasn't who we were looking for and is now in a sling for nothing, haha, don't run from police. And the response from your family member is, wow, that's incredible running, darling. He must have been guilty of something if he ran. Is that a view you share?
He was guilty of something.
And you then receive a message from another family member who you'd sent the video to say, hi Zach, I actually prefer your partner's video, is it shows you cuffing the suspect and shows how much quicker you were. Have a great time.
Well, I object to the name.
Yeah.
I'm not
Thank you.
intending to say the name.
Thank you.
With the person who's
Yeah.
named there on Thursday and see you soon. So it's an expression of joviality. You're joking with family members, having, in breach of the regulations, sent this body-worn video, and in circumstances where a man has gone to hospital complaining of having a sore arm and been put in a sling, and it looks like you think that's funny. Is that fair?
Maybe it's dark humour making light of the situation, yes.
I asked you earlier in the day about compassion fatigue. Do you think this is an example of you having compassion fatigue in this job?
I believe I treated him in the instance afterwards. I'm not sure if the body worn goes longer than that or if it turns off completely in the actual body worn video footage. I believe that's another situation where I would have treated him with respect and compassion after he had stopped running and after the situation was resolved. This is a situation where I am venting. I admit that I talk in this way that is very offensive to a lot of people, but when I'm on the ground, I treat people with respect when I can, and I am as compassionate as possible. And I look forward to when we get to the email from the head of RFDS to the commander of Alice Springs Police Station, which I don't think the police would have given you, asking them to commend me for my compassion in regard to working with an Indigenous child in September of 2019. So I don't think I was suffering from compassion fatigue, but that's not fair to you because I don't think you have that email.
Can I just make it clear to you, Mr. Rolfe, that your lawyers have had every opportunity to provide us with any of that documentation, and we would welcome receipt of it. So if there is anything of that nature that you wish to draw to Her Honour's attention, then there's an open invitation, and there has been for a very long time.
Understood.
It's not any reflection of compassion, is it, this exchange that you have with a family member? You'd accept that?
No, this private exchange is not an example of compassion.
What I asked you about whether or not, reflecting on it, you think you had compassion fatigue but at that point in time, given all you've been dealing with in Alice Springs and your evidence you'd already been given about the lack of supports for young officers. Do you think it's fair that the weight of what was going on around that point in time was weighing on you and affecting your mental health?
Yeah, it potentially may have been, yes. But I still believe I was able to show a a good amount of compassion on the job.
Accepting that you tried and that was your intention, do you think there were times when you let yourself down because of your mental fatigue or whatever else was going on?
None that I can recall on the actual job.
If you look at, and I'm not going to mention the name of this person unless you want me to, but if there's a text exchange at 496 with a family member.
No name. If you can
Sure.
pick the parts that you need to, but obviously otherwise it's a bit obvious.
Sure. So you're texting a family member for support, and I'm not suggesting for a second that that's not appropriate.
Yes.
But it seems clear from that message that you're pretty down. You describe the desert and this dead end gig down here is really taking away my energy. Do you see that, 496?
Yes, I believe at this point I was having a very hard time sleeping.
Okay. And you get some good advice from the family member who's offering you obviously a lot of support. Do you see that?
Yes.
And that's really clear from 498. I'm not going to read that.
Thank you.
There's advice, in effect, I'm just going to summarise. It's advice about trying to be patient and focus on the positives. That's
Yes.
a fair summary.
Yes.
In 499, you just have a look at that.
Yes.
Again, I'm not going to say the name of the person that you're texting. It's a family member who's really supportive in the circumstances, obviously.
Yes.
But what you're expressing there is there's nothing I can do to help myself. People say good things take time. That's not true. Everyone who did selection with me that I beat is already in TRG. People who've done selection after me are in now. That's just a slack saying. It's obvious that this real frustration about not getting into TRG is evident in the messages.
Yes.
Do you think it would have been helpful, again, reflecting on it, if you had actually had a dialogue with your seniors, people who were responsible for making a decision about TRG, and you got more encouragement about your career progression and a clear understanding of what helped and why?
Definitely. I don't know if I had access to them. They were Darwin-based in that regard to the people who actually had... Oh, unless you're talking about Superintendent Vickery.
No, you tell me. Who is it who could have explained that to you in a way that might have helped you?
Someone in Darwin. Yeah, but career progression and some of that form of control would definitely have been welcome.
Okay, so reflecting on that in terms of young officers who might be in Alice Springs now expressing frustration about the grind of general duties.
Yes.
Having a mentor, a positive mentor, who sat down with them and mapped out their career progression and opportunities for them is a good idea.
I think so, and on top of that, perhaps that what I vaguely talked about before, that downtime, positive engagements and training time. In addition, that is, I believe, probably very, very important.
If you don't mind, I'll just try and do this quickly before the break, but would you prefer a break now?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Around this time, it's clear that you go to the doctor and you get some help in relation to your insomnia, is that right?
Yes.
If you can take it from me in terms of your GP records, you prescribed escitalopram and oxazepam on the 9th of October 2019. A benzodiazepine is for the control of anxiety and insomnia. Were you experiencing both of those things?
I think it was mainly insomnia. Or, yes. The main issue was having an incredibly hard time sleeping, which obviously caused a lot of other symptoms.
Sure. What are some of the other symptoms that cause?
I guess it could mirror the symptoms of depression. I think it'd be easier I would feel more comfortable like leaving that to the experts.
All right.
Does that make sense?
Sure. But so could you just tell us, or tell the court I should say, how you were feeling?
I was tired. I was just tired.
And down, is that fair?
Yeah, I'd get down from that, yes.
One of the symptoms of depression can be anger and frustration. Is that what you were feeling? Is that fair or not?
At some times, obviously it wasn't everything's an ebb and flow, a roller coaster. Sometimes I was having really good days. Often having really good days. The things that are going to jump out are the negative moments.
that's why I want to give you the opportunity to tell her on about the context.
Yeah.
But is it fair to say that there were mood swings for you around that time?
Yes.
Would you mind having a look, please, at (518). This is a text exchange, or the beginning of a text exchange with CV, who was someone who had been in the ART. You recall that?
Yes.
Just take a moment to read it so you can see the context. So 518 on the 14th of October, it's number 518, it's the 14th of October. And he says to you, thanks for a chat and hand the Savo brother, really appreciate it. And there's other talks about the college. And you reply, yeah, all good brother, always down for a chat about our leadership, ha ha. Fuck, yeehaw, into it. And that's about the college, I think, is that right? What was that exchange about?
That may have been AFP college. That person that he's referring to is in AFP. So maybe we're talking about a transfer.
Okay.
And then that's just
transfer of you to AFP or him?
I can't recall. I would accept either or both.
You know, earlier you gave evidence that Sergeant Sykes, I withdraw that, Sergeant Kirkby, actually leant on you a bit and asked for advice in terms of his emotional well-being.
Yes.
Was it the same for CV?
At times, yes. Obviously, with my stuff, I had a very close family member that I would lean on, and I didn't probably. I probably didn't let anyone else know, but yes.
But for CV, I don't know what his supports were, but he leant on you a bit. Is that fair?
Yes, at times, and vice versa, but yes.
Okay. And so did Sergeant Kirkby.
Yes, at times.
CV then says to you at 5:20, this is going to sound wired, bro, but in the nicest way, of course. Glad someone thinks the way I do, and I'm not going mad. And you reply, 5:21, nah, I feel exactly the same, man. Cut from the same cloth. I've only talked to you and Sykesy about my head, but even he doesn't get violent like us. But you're not mad, we're just different than them normal folk. What did you mean by that?
That's just, again, talking about outlets. We've spoken to, I think we were speaking about it with Simo before. CV's outlets, he had a very similar, I guess, early adulthood life and up to, I guess, his career progression from leaving school is very similar to mine. His outlets are very much the same as mine. My outlet was generally working out, but specifically it would be boxing. He was the same. That was what. Yes, it's boxing.
Mr. Roth, this doesn't sound like boxing, so I want you to really think about it and reflect on it, because there might be something really helpful that you can tell the court about in relation to what you were experiencing and potentially other officers because of workload or anything else. It sounds like when you read it, you're having an exchange with CV about emotional stress you're under, how you respond to it, and feelings of anger that are expressing themselves in violence or violent behaviour or tense behaviour.
I would actually agree with you, except for the expressing maybe a like nearly a desire to express in that way, less so than an expressing. Does that make sense?
Can you explain that?
Well, I guess like if you are, I guess what he's talking about is when I'm not sure, like if he gets angry, you may have feelings of wanting to inflict violence on someone if you perceive them to do something wrong. And then the healthy outlet for that is this is what I'm not trying to deflect. I'm trying to say that I understand. That's what I'm trying to. I agree with what you're saying, except for the CV was not going around, and I definitely wasn't going around. Just because we had a bad day assaulting someone. But I think what he's saying is that he may feel like that, and the healthy outlet is to turn it into boxing.
I'm not suggesting that you were going around in the street kicking someone who wasn't doing anything to break the law. But it's pretty clear from that exchange, isn't it, that what you and CV are saying, or are exchanging as officers who were supporting each other, is the work was hard, it was really difficult to control your anger and temper in a work environment like that, where you're dealing with high pressure and a lot of crime and people pushing your buttons all the time.
Well, it probably does come from a lot of trauma as well. I guess we were dealing with a lot of hard jobs. I know the hardest jobs. I think I could speak for CV and for myself and for. I'll just speak for ourselves. I think he would allow me to do that in this case. The hardest jobs for us would be the crimes against children and crimes against women. Obviously, they affect you. And yeah, there's sometimes a feeling that the justice system doesn't do enough to stop that offending.
Her Honour, you can take it, is well aware of the really high levels of
Yeah, of course.
that
Yes.
that officers are having to deal with. Is that one thing that you were talking to CV about, your frustration in trying to deal with those jobs and those offenders?
We would definitely would have domestic violence and crimes against children. For us too, it'd be surprising if anyone said they weren't affected by that.
Sure, and surprising if anybody didn't feel angry about people being victimised by that level of violence.
Yes.
So it's not surprising, is it, that when you're a young police officer in that environment, or any police officer in that environment, it is going to make you angry, having to deal with offenders.
Well,
Is that fair?
I object to this. The claim is that the anger in relation to specific is somehow generalised, and I object to that suggestion.
I'm trying to have a really meaningful engaged exchange with Mr. Rolfe, and he is more than capable of really helping this court to get to these issues. Perhaps if we might have a break, Mr. Abbott can reflect on that. Mr. Rolfe.
Well, it is time for the afternoon break, and I think it is would be a common experience if you are continually exposed to difficult situations in the community as a police officer, that some feeling and reaction to that is inevitable. And one of the things that this inquest is looking at is how can that be managed and assisted so that it doesn't come to harm individuals in a physical way or in an emotional or psychological way. So an aspect of our concern is with the welfare of particularly young police who are exposed to a relentless experience of trauma in the environment. I thought Constable Rolfe's suggestion, Mr. Rolfe's suggestion now, reflecting on his time as an officer, factoring in as part of the police working life, opportunities as a police officer to engage in positive ways with the community, was a very insightful suggestion.
I agree with that, but the line of questioning where I was dealing with was my client's discussion with counsel assisting about women and children and the effect that seeing terrible things being done to women and children, how that affected him in his job. And there's now kind of some sort of progression that because you felt angry and upset about that somehow that affected your general policing activities.
It's certainly well known that a very high percentage of the workload in Alice Springs for young constables on the road is exposure to harm against women and directly or indirectly against
Of course.
children and families.
Yeah, I
But
agree.
we'll adjourn.
I agree, Your Honour.
Stand. Coronial Court now temporarily adjourned.
from Gannett and Associates speaking. Elizabeth from Gannett and Associates.
Ms. Balch, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, thank you.
Ms. Balch?
Yes, can you hear me? Hello? Hello? I can hear you. Can you hear me? I can hear you.
Ms. Balch, can you hear me?
I can hear you, thank you.
I think
Can
we
you hear
can
me?
faintly hear you. Can I just ask that you keep your phone on mute unless you're addressing the court?
Absolutely, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
There's some monkeys here, but
Now, we can talk about that.
Just need two.
some afternoon energy.
I can't know. That can work?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to show you any time I write when you're just any time I write.
No,
Thank you.
Stand. Coronial courts, no issue. Please be seated.
Mr. Rogers, we took that time over the break. Is there anything else that you wanted to say about that exchange that you had with CV or anything else about that issue we were discussing before the break?
No, thank you.
There's a final use of force matter that I wanted to take you to prior to coming to the 9th of November. It involves a Mr. Albert Bailey on the 12th of October 2019. Just to refresh your memory about that job. Police were conducting patrols outside Bojangles around in the Alice Springs Town Council building at around 2:30 a.m. on the 12th of October 2019. A man by the surname of Bailey and a woman were having an argument, and police officers conducting the patrol saw them, and the officers, just to remind you, were yourself, Sergeant Sykes, Constable Hanson, there was a Badger and Crotty, and Sergeant Kelly. Badger?
Well,
I might have misspelled that.
Your Honour, this is an ongoing, I'm told this is an ongoing investigation. And for that reason, my client declines to answer any further questions, and in my view, a certificate would not be expedient because it's an ongoing investigation.
Mr. Abbott is correct. It is an investigation that is continuing.
Can I have it clarified, is that a criminal investigation that's continuing?
No.
No. Oh, in no circumstances then a certificate should be provided. Oh, a certificate has been provided.
Yes.
And there are a number of police officers, I might have misspelled one or mistyped one, so a number of police officers, including the ones that I know I'm accurate about.
Yes.
Sergeant Sykes, Constable Hanson, and Officer Crotty and Sergeant Kelly.
Yeah, so Constable Sykes.
Constable Sykes.
Sergeant Kelly.
Beg your pardon, thank you very much. Was that your patrol group at the time? you regularly?
I believe
try?
so. And then there was another couple elements from a different section were there. They may have been similarly to attached to youth patrol. They may have been a different section like that.
Okay. Officers that you knew pretty well?
Some of them, yes.
Obviously, you knew Sykes, Hanson, and Kelly well.
I believe Kelly was fairly new to Alice Springs. Like, he'd been in the job a long time. So when I say new, he may have come back. But I believe he was fairly new to our patrol group.
Okay. What about Crotty?
He was there a fair while, but out of the least amount of time out of the remainder.
So do I take it then that you had been there, out of that group, I think you had been there the most period of time?
I think myself and Hanson, same amount of time.
Gotcha.
Then Sykes, and I could be completely wrong.
Okay, so you and Hanson were the seniors there, on that, in terms of the amount of time you've been in Alice Springs and your experience?
Yes, but the other officers, obviously Kelly and I believe the other two, who I can't recall their names, were, I would guess, more senior.
All right. Sergeant Kelly was obviously a higher rank.
Yeah, of course.
But in terms of understanding the landscape and knowing what you were dealing with on patrol, you were obviously a relatively experienced member.
Yes.
Just to remind you, yourself and Officer Hanson ran across the council lawns, and we see you make contact with a man at speed. I'll play the body worn video and perhaps you can explain it for us.
Yes.
Your body worn video, and it's found at MFI. I'm just reminded that it goes for a period of, it goes for 7 minutes, so we don't need to play all of that. I'll tell you when I think it's a relevant period to stop, unless anybody wants me to keep going. Thank you, Mark.
Stay on the ground. Come on, get a woman. You can get a woman. I'm not sick, buddy. Stand back. Can you stop this feedback? Can you stop this feedback? Give me that hand. Can you stop this feedback? Can you stop this feedback? Can you stop this feedback?
I think that's probably enough, unless you want me to continue, Mr. Gold.
No, that's fine.
It seems there that as a result of that argument, you were motivated to run over and at full force to push that fellow and he sustained an injury to his head as a result. Is that right?
I believe calling that an argument is minimising a domestic violence incident, and there's evidence of an assault or multiple assaults occurring during that incident.
The woman that he was alleged to have assaulted, is that the woman talking there, Ruby?
Yes.
And she is insisting that she wasn't assaulted and she wasn't hit by it. Is that right?
Yes. I believe you guys should be aware that domestic violence victims will often protect the offenders.
In relation to that matter, when that man was pushed by you, he was pushed from behind, is that right?
I'm not exactly sure the side behind.
It's not clear, or please tell us if I'm wrong, were there any verbal commands at all that you used prior to pushing him?
I can't recall.
As a result of that push, he fell into a bench seat attached to the wall at the council building, is that right?
No, that's just a bit of information. He hit the wall.
Okay, so I'm reading from the use of force report, but you say he hit the wall causing a head injury, is that right?
Yes.
And his forehead was split and he had a large cut that needed 9 sutures to close the wound. Is that what you came to understand?
Yeah, I accept that.
In the use of force report, you said the man was standing in the woman's face with clenched fists and showing pre-attack indicators. You recall that?
Yes.
You responded to what you perceived to be pre-attack indicators.
I witnessed him headbutt her and continue what was an assault, and I was in fear for her physical safety.
She denied ever being headbutted though, didn't she?
She did, yes.
In your exchange with Mr. Bailey, it appears to be a classic example of you expressing significant anger as a result of what you saw, the domestic violence incident, or the anticipated incident.
In that incident, I could accept a bit of anger came out in my voice, yes.
Reflecting back on it and the use of force principles, there were other ways you should have dealt with that did not involve a use of the force you engaged in. Do you accept that?
I disagree, and I think if the whole evidence was shown, for example, the CCTV that shows the assault occurring, to give it in a whole line, and the fact that myself and Mitch Hansen both made contact at the same time, which was obviously not organised, there's more evidence to this that's being presented.
Sure, let's play that CCTV then. So you
Yes.
can explain. This is MFI double N.
This isn't the right CCTV, this is edited short.
You say there's longer CCTV.
Definitely there's longer CCTV that tracks them for a minute or two before that, watching a verbal argument and shows a headbutt and him strike her with a fist. The police have that CCTV.
We've got it, so this was just going to give us the MFI, otherwise we'll... So we'll read that 3165. Sure. If it's all right with Your Honour, we'll identify the right one overnight and then come back to that if necessary. Sure. So I want to make sure you've got every opportunity to comment on that, Mr. Rolfe. So we'll certainly play that at some point, either this afternoon or tomorrow.
You might be able to identify it now, I don't
Sure.
know.
Mr. Coleridge is reminding me that CCTV footage, the full CCTV footage, was played in full during Sergeant Kelly's evidence. What I want to put to you in relation to that is about your use of force. Have you watched that full CCTV recently?
Yes.
So you've had the opportunity to reflect on it?
Yes.
at the time that you used that force, you appreciated that you caused a significant injury to that man's forehead
Yes,
as a result of your push and him falling into the wall.
as a result of the contact made by myself and Constable Hanson.
You both pushed him at the same time, is that right?
Yes, unintentionally.
You,
I guess we hit him. We didn't plan to collide with him at the same time, but there was the two of us that made contact at the same time.
so you both ran towards him at the same time with your hands outstretched? Or
I guess with the same intent, as did the other two officers in the CCTV. Everyone responded in the exact same manner. It just so happened that Hanson and I arrived at the same time.
So you can certainly speak to your intent. Your intent was to reach your hands out and make contact with Mr. Buckley
Yes,
and to push him into that wall.
not to push him into the wall, to make contact with him to stop the assault occurring on that woman.
I think this board might have been able to locate that quickly, so we'll just. Is this the one you're referring to?
If you could just skip through to the point where at some point they walk over to that wall. Obviously, this could be CCTV from any night at that location. I'm not sure yet.
Sure, well, let's identify it shortly if I can.
You just have to keep skip. It looks like it's 19 minutes. I think what we're saying here is they're up against the wall.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure how long this is prior. This is her friend getting in between them, trying to protect her.
Let's pause there for a moment. You're providing a commentary on that video, watching it now. Were you in the vicinity at that time?
I believe I was when I think you can see in the body worn video when I turned my attention to it. you'd have to, if you could, I don't know if the times are the exact same, but if you could cross-reference the time on my body worn video because you can see when my attention goes to this, you could pinpoint the exact moment I start watching this.
Okay, it might become clear in the CCTV too, so let's just keep watching.
Yeah.
That should help us later.
Because I was watching the verbal argument for a time before I saw the physical aspect of it, but I don't remember this bit.
Okay.
I've watched this afterwards. Headbutt there. Punch there.
So you were there, we weren't, but you have visibility in a way that makes it difficult, that is different to what we're seeing there. You say that what is depicted there is a headbutt and a punch, is that right?
Well,
Yes.
I object to her claim that's different from what she's saying.
Well, it's obvious this is a CCTV. It appears to be from a high angle. I'm not precisely sure where it is in relation to where you were standing.
Neither am I. It could have been one of those transportable or those movable police pods. We didn't have access to this CCTV on the night.
Sure. But this isn't, you're not seeing it when you're there on the night from the same angle that we're seeing it
No,
now.
I would imagine the camera's 5 metres above.
Whatever you saw clearly made you concerned for the female who was there.
Not only you, the other police officers.
Yes, all officers were concerned for her safety.
And just in terms of what you did, you and all the officers raced at the same time in response to something happening that
Yes.
Mr. Bailey was doing, correct?
Correct.
And when you reflect back on that, you're certainly reflective, aren't you, about the anger that you felt at that time about the commission of that offence?
I did feel a level of anger that did seep into my voice in that regard, which is uncommon.
Did it seep into your actions in you and alongside other officers using too much force there when you look back on it?
No.
So do you say that it was acceptable for all of you in those circumstances, after you all ran together, for you and Mr. Hanson to push at the same time and to cause Mr. Bailey to fall into the wall and cause that injury?
See, obviously it wasn't planned for Hanson and I to make contact at the same time, but that causes so with my kit and body armour plate that I was wearing, probably weigh anywhere between 85 and 90 kilos. Mitch Hanson would probably be the same. So basically that collision, because it occurred at the same moment, doubles that collision from 90 kilo collision to 180 kilo collision. That wasn't planned. If it was just the one of us, the injury hopefully wouldn't have occurred or would have been a lot worse. But that's part of that's just timing, and unfortunately our intentions were good and our actions were lawful. At least they were deemed lawful. They were cleared in the use of force report. The process of that use of force report was cleared. And I could be wrong, but I've been made aware multiple times that this job has been completely cleared and reopened and cleared again. So I'm not sure.
Kelly was one who cleared the use of force. Is that
I believe initially, and then it had to go to someone above him to be cleared. I think it has to get cleared by 2 people. I could be wrong, When I was there, I was aware that it had to be a sarge and a superintendent.
You talked about the use of this body armour. Was that standard issue?
That was standard issue body armour plate that I wore in a non-standard issue carrier.
What was the non-standard issue carrier?
So, have you received? It's hard to say. I don't have access to it anymore.
Did the non-standard issue carrier add weight?
No, it actually took weight away.
In relation to this job, is this one of the ones where you recorded on your phone the body worn video footage?
Yes.
And for what purpose?
Same as before, unprofessional. It was unprofessional. I have no excuse. Same as the other incidents.
Can you have a look at text 512, please?
Yes, city.
You're texting her, a paramedic with a first name that begins with E,
Yes.
and you text her at 9:20, or you should have come, you best mate Coronial.
She texts.
I beg your pardon, she texts you, Ms. Rob. Or you should have come, your best mate Crosby's here. Was she a friend of yours at that time?
Yes, we had a good working relationship with the paramedics in town.
Okay, did you form friendships with a number of the paramedics as well?
Yes.
Working relationships. Why was she texting you at 9:20 with that message to you?
I don't recall where they were at. I guess there was a group of people doing something that I didn't go to.
So it was the day after the Bailey incident that she texted you that?
I accept that.
And then you reply to her about something to do with Officer Crotty, and you tell her that you slept for 13 hours, you just started sleeping again properly.
Yes.
It appears that the medication that you'd taken was assisting with that.
Yes.
And she replies, yes, he did, as in Crotty made an appearance, etc.
Yes.
The next text message, 515, on the 14th of October, is this. Yeah, you guys start nights so early. Who will you be working with tonight? I've had some busy shifts lately. Mashed some dude's face against a wall, and that talkative Georgia paramedic came and quickly got on board that we were treating him extra nice, so he didn't make a complaint.
Yes.
You're talking about the Bailey job on the 12th of October?
Yes.
It's the case, isn't it, that you knew immediately after that happened that you had gone a bit too far in terms of both of you striking Mr. Bailey at the same time and causing that head injury?
No.
Are you boasting there to the paramedic about mashing some dude's face against a wall?
Yeah, I guess I am. Unprofessionally, I am boasting about it, yes.
It suggests that you are at that stage using that violence as a way of coping with the pressures. Is that fair?
No, I would disagree. I would say I'm just using this again. I know I keep coming back to it as a way of venting frustrations because obviously that job is one of those jobs that I was talking about before that does create, I'm not gonna lie, that does create anger seeing a woman get assaulted by the person that should be the main person in her life who should be protecting her more than anything. That does cause anger, yes.
It's the very same day that you have that exchange with CV.
Yes.
So you put the picture together. You had a low mood on the 9th of October and you were prescribed the escitalopram and oxazepam. At text 507, you explain to the family member that you're just going to tell Mark that you're taking that. That's Mark Sykes.
Yes.
So you don't tell anybody at work about that other than Mark Sykes, is that right?
Yes.
And a few days later, there's the Bailey incident on the 12th of October where he gets a head injury and needs to go to the hospital and get stitches. 2 days later, you're texting the paramedic saying, I've had some busy shifts lately, mashed some dude's face against a wall. And that talkative Georgia paramedic came and quickly brought on board that we were treating him extra nice so he didn't make a complaint. And then, very same day, you have a chat with CB, who leant on you for emotional support, and you on him. And CB says, this is going to sound wired, bro, but in the nicest way, of course, glad someone thinks the way I do and I'm not going mad. And you reply, nah, I feel exactly the same, man, cut from the same cloth. I've only talked to you and Sykesy about my head, but even he doesn't get violent like us. But you're not mad, we're just different than the normal folk. Just think about that carefully. That message to CB was not about boxing, was it? It was in the context of dealing with these serious violence like DV and getting violent yourself in response to it.
No, my answer doesn't change from the same question that's been asked previously. I definitely got down, I got low, I felt anger, but when I'm on the job, I did not let that affect my work. I did my job professionally and as compassionately as I could.
I took you to the message where you say to a family member on the 9th of October, I'm only going to tell Mark, meaning Mark Sykes, I'm taking these things in case something happens and someone should know if I'm taking anything, i.e. failing a drug test.
Yes.
Or something. Did you do routine drug tests at all at any time in the Northern Territory?
Not while I was there. I think I mentioned that because, sorry, what text number was that again? I just saw it.
507.
Yeah, I think I said that just to pass on the message that it's not like, in case something happens, in case I hurt myself.
Okay.
It wasn't that, it was in case something happens, medical, administrative. If I was in a vehicle crash and the paramedics so often ask, is he on any medication?
Okay, you didn't want a family member to get the wrong impression.
Correct, I'm passing on the impression that it's not for, I say it's just in case something happens.
Sure.
It wasn't, I had no intentions of hurting myself.
Okay.
That was what I was trying to pass on.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
When you spoke to Sykes, Mark Sykes, what did you tell him about what was going on in your head?
I think all I told him really was that I couldn't sleep. And then I think we discussed what I was doing.
Did you think at that stage about reaching out for more help from the Northern Territory Police Force as opposed to just telling Sykes?
No, and I think then I wouldn't have trusted the NT Police Force to be a place that I could go to for welfare support.
Okay, why not?
I hadn't really had any dealings with any welfare. I know it's there. You can call and talk to a psych if you want to, but it was hard to trust them that what you said to the either the psych or the welfare people wouldn't get back to the organisation. It didn't feel like a safe space to go to. But I think there was there's obviously some welfare officers and there's some psychs, but that's it.
How did you find out about the welfare officers or the Sykes?
We had a welfare officer that was basically on duty most day shifts in the Alice Springs station. The Sykes we were made aware of in police school. I guess it's always a standard response. Someone will always say, if you need help, call the police have Sykes. It's a throwaway line, it seems, but there's Sykes there. But I wouldn't say they're completely trusted by the police force. If that's not for them personally. As humans, they're good to go. I think it's the fact that the police the actual executive, for example, could know. For example, I spoke to a psych, and the police attempted to subpoena those notes. The police psych, stuff like that. Not the actual trust issues with the psychologist.
Do you mean after Kumanjayi passed away, you spoke to the psych or before?
After. So I was I had to.
But in terms of your level of trust at the time, we're talking about October 2019.
Yeah.
Do you, is it your evidence that you understood that to be a generally held view amongst officers in Alice Springs that you didn't talk to the sites or welfare?
I wasn't aware of anyone who did. Oh, the welfare person, everyone talked to her, but I'm not sure if anyone talked to her in regard to
Sure.
welfare.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
And was there general chat about not trusting these people as in to keep the confidential nature of it?
I think the conversations in regard to mental health in the police force were very much cliche and the same views that I've shown in my regard to how I dealt with my issues of burnout, were probably how similar ways in which other people dealt with their issues of burnout in outlets or ways that were could have been a lot more healthy. For example, alcohol use or potential drug use. I'm talking about prescription drugs, medication that I would say there's a lot more police officers on antidepressants or the like than goes reported. So there's a lot of officers on, I would say, on that, just trying to maintain their own. They're trying to do it themselves, like I was trying to do. Yeah.
Are you able to share with us any reflections on how that could be done better, apart from what you've already told us about?
I honestly, because I've obviously left the police force, haven't thought about that in regard to policing. In myself over the last 4 years, obviously the last 4 years have been extremely stressful, even more so than the job. And I don't really want to talk about my personal stuff now, but I can say that I'm not on medication and I've got healthier outlets. That probably would have come about anyway in regard to maturing and with age. So on a personal sense, obviously I know better outlets. For example, I think back then at the time, one of the worst things I was doing, which was just a lack of education, was due to the lack of sleep, I would overtrain, and now with more education, I know that's going to cause me to sleep less. So I was doing more damage to myself outside of work. I haven't given it much thought in regard to the policing, except for what I've said before, because I'm not there anymore.
What about self-medicating with alcohol? Is that something you were doing?
No, alcohol's never been a big thing. I don't drink too much.
Okay. What about other drugs?
Whilst in the police force, on a handful of occasions, I used marijuana in edible form, and sometimes that would be to a couple of times. It's just for fun, but I would chase that for a chance to sleep as well.
So a way of dealing with the stress of the job, is that part of it?
I guess I never delved into it enough because I didn't see the psych and stuff. The issues with sleeping, yes, you're right, because the issues with sleeping were compounded by night shift, for example. Shift work, so yes, it is.
Did you get any advice from anybody in the NT police about how to deal with that sleeplessness from night shift?
I don't think anyone was figuring that out.
When you spoke to CV, he was a sergeant with considerable years of experience in NT police.
I don't think so.
I see. He was an officer or something?
Senior conning.
Senior constable, okay.
I believe.
Senior to you, obviously.
Yes.
And he talked to you about your head, what was going on in his head, and you reciprocated. I'm just going to suggest to you again, that was an exchange of messages between yourself and him as someone you trusted about emotional stress, at least, was it?
Yes.
Did he ever suggest to you to get help within the police force for dealing with it?
I don't think so.
Did you ever, when you were talking to Sergeant Kirkby in September, and he was saying to you, thanks for helping me sort that, whatever had happened, did he ever suggest to you that he was reaching out for help into the police force to deal with his stress?
Because the timelines, I know he has now, but I don't know when that started. It's likely I would accept, and again, I would rather the question go to him, because I know he has told me, but that could have occurred after the shooting. He may not have sought help beforehand.
Was there any sergeant or senior sergeant who was role modelling for you how to deal with the stress or pressures of the job? In a healthy way.
I honestly think everyone's just trying to figure it out themselves.
You had, as we know from looking at the brief of evidence, come to the attention of professional standards by this time in October 2019 for a number of issues. Did you realise that you had come to the attention of professional standards? 7-1.
Honest answer, I don't know, because shortly after a lot of these things came up afterwards, which could have been started before.
All right, well, I'll just see if I can refresh your memory. I have already asked you about the body-worn video issues.
Obviously, body-worn video, yes.
Obviously that came up.
Yes.
But in relation to the use of force, we have a statement on the brief of evidence which is at 7-115 from Virginia Reid, who you knew about. You've already given some evidence in relation to her. You understand that she came to work for a professional standards command?
Yes.
She, in her statement, explains, paragraph 10, that after the Ryder matter, she says it was about this time I spoke to Commander Curry and Superintendent Vickery during a command management team meeting and advised them that I was reviewing a number of complaints referred to me from the Ombudsman Office, where Naja had raised concerns with the complaint outcomes and that it was likely they would be recategorised and further investigated. I further conveyed that I was concerned about Constable Rogg's non-adherence to the body-worn video policy, and that this was the third occasion I had become aware of people fleeing from him and injuries occurring when apprehended. If you can accept from me reading this, this was around June after the Ryder decision in 2019.
Yes.
Was there a further warning to you about body-worn video around that time?
I just had 2, and I don't know the timings of them.
Was there a warning to you at any time around then that you had been red flagged effectively for excessive use of force?
No.
What about that there were any concerns about people being apprehended by you and suffering injuries?
No, there's only one recollection of a meeting I had, which could have been in in any form of, I guess, potentially corrective measures chat with Pauline Vickery and Alistair Gall.
Okay.
And again, this job could easily, I'm not going to say the date's right, but this job could be searched up. And I don't know I haven't recalled if Pauline Vickery said she did speak to me, but there was a moment where she did speak to me in the office, and this was because I had conducted a 36-hour straight shift, which culminated in, I ended up in Tennant Creek from Alice after 36 hours, and we got a plane back with a prisoner who had to go to hospital, and he was in a coma, not from me, from himself, and as I was walking off the runway, there was a sergeant, I'm happy to give you his name on a piece of paper and get a shared around for his opinion first. I believe I said to him, as I was walking away, I said, the dickhead's coming off the plane now, just in his ear sight. And then I was pulled aside for calling I guess the issue was me calling the client the dickhead.
Okay, calling the alleged offender a dickhead.
Yes.
And Vickery spoke to you about that.
That's the only time I remember about any kind of corrective measures.
All right. As this letter goes on, I'm not contradicting you, I just want to give you an opportunity to...
Yeah, I could be wrong, yeah.
In the 17th of July 2019, Superintendent Reid says that she was in Alice Springs with Commander Bacon, and during that visit, she recalls discussing with Acting Commander Nobbs and Acting Superintendent Peter Dash the PSC concerns relating to excessive use of force and officers not activating their body-worn video. Was there any conversation that you recall with Commander Bacon or Superintendent Nobbs or Superintendent Dash?
No, the first time I met Commander Bacon, I believe, was after I was arrested in the cells, I believe. The only time I ever recall having a conversation with, obviously I had multiple conversations with Senior Sergeant Dash, as he was on, at some points, the OIC, so he was on our floor. In regard to Jody Nobbs, the only conversation that I can ever remember, the only time I was ever in his office was for prepping a IRT deployment.
When was that?
Where?
When, roughly?
It would be, I can't remember if it's Barrow Creek, which I think it's been mentioned. It's been mentioned, the job.
We can look that up, but you don't recall any conversation with him about use of force?
No.
Concerns around that?
No.
And then you just gave some evidence in relation to, was it Officer Dash?
Yes.
You did see him on a pretty regular basis?
I saw him around the station on a regular basis. I don't believe I've ever had a meeting with him.
Okay. And did he ever take you aside and have a discussion with you about use of force?
No, never.
And that includes, does it, the period following the Ryder decision, when everybody was talking about it?
Yes, that includes that.
Was he talking about it, Officer Dash?
Oh, not to me that I can recall at all.
Do you recall him talking about it at all in the station?
Not in my presence, no.
And then finally, in mid-October, Superintendent Reid says, I again raised with the Commander Southern that we had received yet another complaint from Najar, and that one was in relation to Luke Madrill. So at no stage after that did Commander Curry talk to you about use of force?
No. There may have been emails from PSC asking me to give a more detailed response for some of those jobs, but no discussions from rank in regard to...
Would you have been open to a discussion about the use of force and things that you might have done differently?
Oh, yes, most definitely.
Who do you think in the station you would have been receptive to in terms of receiving advice about how to be a better police officer in those engagements?
Honestly, I would be open to anyone giving me advice if it can be portrayed in a way that's, I guess, good advice. I'm open to good advice. There's a specialist training area in a training office for an OST instructor role in Alice Springs. They could potentially be the best person to provide advice on that.
What sort of instructor, sorry?
OST.
OST.
Yeah, a normal instructor that we have, operational safety tactics. There is a role in Alice Springs, I believe. They generally take up the firearms trainer role, so they would be good for that advice, but I'd be open to advice from anyone.
Do you think that it would be helpful? You talked about the resentment that a number of police officers had towards PSC and the reasons why, and that there was a culture of resentment towards PSC. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yes, definitely.
And that obviously affected you as a young police officer starting out in Alice Springs?
Yes.
And you picked up that culture as well?
Yes.
So do you think it would be helpful for officers to understand that if they want to be open about a job they're concerned about where somebody got injured or they worried that they went too far or they used force in a way that might not be justified, they can go and effectively disclose it and be comfortable doing so and getting some assistance?
Yes, I think the greatest issue that the officers have with our professional standards command would be the fact that, as you've seen through discussions here, remedial advice is can be an email or it can be a quick discussion from someone. I think it's been described as an energetic discussion. What a large portion of the police that I've worked with view that as, and myself included, remedial advice is nearly seen as a tick in the box from professional standards commands to say that they have conducted an investigation and they can tick the box saying we found some wrongdoing, but it's not to the level of discipline, but still we've completed an investigation. It's seen as a tick in the box. I think a lot of officers on the ground would be, every officer that I know would actually be open to some form of remedial training. Every officer that I talk to would be willing to be trained better, but remedial advice seems to be more for professional standards command to tick their own boxes and go, ha, we got an investigation, rather than, it doesn't really seem to assist police officers, or it can be done in a way that is I can tell you, for example, for me, I've received a number of remedial advice sessions post when I returned to work in Darwin, and I sat in an office with one of the PSC officers, and she just basically sat there and watched me read out her documents, which constituted a number of the remedial advice. I just sat there and read a document for 10 minutes, the remedial advice done. That did not make me a better police officer. Does that make sense? Because all the officers I know are open to that.
But have you ever seen anything like that? Or did you ever see anything like that?
I have never seen retraining in regard to an incident occur. Where there's a number of incidents where they use, for example, body-worn video of an incident, and they might use that in the yearly defensive tactics requal. For example,
Could you say that again?
so the yearly defensive tactics requal, during the requalification, during part of that, there is a opportunity, depending on the instructor, to play videos and talk about scenarios. So I've seen it occur where videos are utilised as, for example, bad examples, dangerous examples of what not to do, yet those police officers involved, who you would deem should probably get retraining in something, do not receive it. So I haven't seen any productive retraining. Not to say that it hasn't happened, I just haven't seen it.
And at the same time, what you've told us about the PSC system is that there was, if somebody was asked to explain their conduct to the PSC, there was a resentment about doing it. And immediately there was a thought, wasn't there, that this is going to be a punishment. I'm not going to get anything out of this. It's productive.
When they ask you for, yeah, I don't think anyone ever thought that they were going to get anything productive from talking to PSC. Yes.
Have a look, if you don't mind, just before we finish up, but at text 533. This is one of your bosses, in effect, isn't it? A sergeant who's in your patrol group.
Yes.
Someone
yes.
who's responsible for reviewing use of force incidents that you're involved in.
Yes.
And what he messages you there on the 17th of October is, well, fuck me, I'm having to answer more questions about an incident over a year ago. Some turd claimed I knocked him off his push bike with 301 and then roughed him up. Only person to get roughed up was me, as I got dragged on my face as he was trying to run away. All seems well, but now they have a hard on over the fact I used 301 to try to lock him in. They're now asking a fourth lot of questions. I think they pick someone and then just pick on them, finding my breaking point, maybe. And you respond, over a year ago, fuck their gay cunts. Yeah, they just find a name and go for you, over and over. Fuck them. Just let them waste time. And then if they ever have enough evidence, just stress leave until they let it go. It seems to be what everyone else does. To be fair on you, it's the sergeant initially complaining to you about the PSC, correct?
Yes.
But what you reply to him is, you join in, don't you, in complaining about the system and say the way to deal with that is that whenever a complaint comes, if they've got enough evidence, just go on stress leave.
Yes, correct, because that came from that idea that I passed on, came from the information that we in Alice Springs were given from the that job that made national headlines, the rape of a toddler in Tennant Creek, and the detectives involved arrested the wrong individual. The information we received was that the individual that they arrested that gave an alibi, and I could be getting it wrong. This is just what we got told in Alice Springs, the word that was spread. Basically, they messed up, arrested someone that they fairly obviously shouldn't have, and then when it was found out and when the punishments were starting to come, all detectives involved took stress leave for a number of months. It went away, they came back to work, no issues. That's where that came from. So that's a specific incident that caused that thought in my head.
So it's a thought in your head that you're expressing to your sergeant after he's complaining about the system.
Yes.
It sounds like you're expressing a view that was wider than just you and Sergeant Kirkby in Alice Springs Police Station at that time in terms of using the system.
Oh, definitely, yes. I wouldn't say, again, I can't speak how widespread, but definitely not us too.
It's completely unacceptable, isn't it, in a police force? This is not just a criticism of you, but it's completely unacceptable in a police force to have police officers encourage each other and accept abuse of the stress leave system.
Oh, yes, I accept that, and yes, there's a number of things that are unacceptable. Yes,
And
including
just-
that.
Including the text message, you mean?
Yes. Yes.
What else do you want to say about that?
All I was saying is that it would be better to go on stress leave than break for him when he says finding my breaking point. But in regard to using stress leave to, I guess, fudge the system, yes, unacceptable.
Because what you say to him is referencing the job you just told us about.
Yes.
But just let them waste time, and then if they ever have enough evidence, just stress leave until they let it go. It seems to be what everyone else does.
Yes.
And you know that there's been officers in the Northern Territory who are off on stress leave for years.
I believe someone's been off for 5 years and got a degree in that time.
That abuse of the system has to stop, doesn't it?
Yeah, the abuse of the system, yes.
Because it makes it so much more stressful for other officers on the ground who've got to deal with the rest of the day.
Yes.
Just before we leave, I just want to take you to a couple of text messages to see if you can help explain them so that we can move on to the 7th of November and the lead up to the incident
Yes.
tomorrow. You've already frankly acknowledged that while you were a police officer, you engaged in some illicit drug use in terms of cannabis, mostly cookies, is that right?
Yes.
And that was in part a way of de-stressing?
Sometimes, yes.
And sometimes to help with sleep?
Yes.
And sometimes for
Just recreation.
all right.
Yes, but again, a handful.
There's a text message at 484 from you to Constable Kirstenfeld, 26th of September 2019. You phoned him the night before, you missed your call. Sorry, you phoned him earlier, he missed your call.
Yes.
And then he asked you what was up and you said, nothing, brother. I was just wondering if there was an RBT last night. I was on the beers, got on to Mitch. How was yesterday? Saw the crime scene and the hospital guard tests. You were a group of young officers who were close and had each other's backs in the force. Did that include telling each other when there was an RBT so you could avoid getting picked up drink driving?
It seems that, yes, in regard to telling each other with the RBT, but no, I don't drink drive.
What was that text about?
I can't recall. I honestly can't recall that engagement in that text.
There's a text message at 3:16, if you don't mind having a look at that, to a friend whose name starts with R.
Yeah.
Telling you not to text while driving. Do you remember this one?
I've read this one.
Okay, just have a read of it.
Yes.
And she says, also, don't text and drive. And you reply to her, I'm a cop, remember, above the law.
Yes.
Do you mean that literally?
No, I do not.
Weren't there, a number of occasions where you and other officers, I'll withdraw that, I'll start again. There were a number of rules that you and other officers in Alice Springs didn't comply with. You've conceded that throughout the course of your evidence. Body worn video is one of them.
Yes.
Was there a situation in Alice Springs at that time where you decided for yourself what rules were legitimate in obeying and what ones weren't?
What laws?
What
or
laws?
Laws?
Yep.
No. I've texted and driven before. There's a minor one. I think most people in this room would have done that.
Well, also the illicit drugs is against the law. You're a serving police officer, whether it's cannabis or not, you're breaking the law.
Yes.
And you made a decision to break the law.
Yes.
And that's because you thought it was no big deal, is that right?
Yes.
And were there other laws that you and other officers were happy to break because you thought they were no big deal?
None that I can think of unless you got any up your sleeve.
What about rules, in terms of rules set by command? Rules about body worn video, one that you've told us about? Any other rules that you were happy to?
Not that I can think of.
Your Honour, might we leave it there for the day rather than sit till 5? Before my learned friend rises, I raised this with the witness. These are long days, and I was asked by the witness what time we're going to sit to. I'm happy to press on if necessary, but in my respectful submission, the witness should be asked whether or not that's his preference for Mr. Rabbit rises.
Okay. I'll ask you questions.
I think you're right. You can answer. Do you want to continue?
Yeah, honestly, I am happy to continue as long as I guess my preference is to finish Friday. So if we can get that done, yes, I'm happy to see it. Yeah. I'll ask.
Can I come then to the 7th of November 2019?
Yes.
On that day, you found out about a warrant for the arrest of Kumanjayi Walker, is that right?
Yes. Yes.
You saw that, did you, as another thing that you could be proactive about in your policing?
I think I was tasked to look into it.
You gave evidence about this at trial, do you recall that?
Yeah, I recall the majority of it, but it was, again, it's a long time ago.
So when you gave evidence at trial, you explained that you have a daily intel sheet. This is transcript 1037.
Yes.
March 2022. That sets out the jobs for the past 24 hours, including active arrest targets and any significant jobs that have occurred in the last 24 hours, correct?
Yes.
And there was something that captured your attention there. You saw an active arrest target for Kumanjayi, correct?
Yes, this reminds me, yes.
The active arrest target was for breach of parole and assault police.
Yes.
And having identified him in that context, you then looked up the promise job, the police reference number that was attached to the assault, correct?
Yes.
Did you also then have access to Kumanjayi's history, as in criminal history?
Yes.
And Mr. College will bring that up, the promise job and what it showed you. What was attached to that job was the body-worn video footage, correct?
Correct.
Now, at that stage, just explain for us, if you don't mind, the daily info sheet. What did that give you in terms of an overview of the jobs?
I believe, again, long time, I believe in overview of the job, all it was really was the mugshot and the offences. There could have been further details for specific incidents, but often there was just a number of mugshots in the offences.
And you were working at that time in a patrol group, correct?
Correct.
So you were sitting there in your computer, you logged on, and you were being proactive about the jobs to follow up on that day?
Correct.
Was that something that you were encouraged to do by your sergeant or something that you did of your own initiative?
I think it was encouraged by most sergeants.
So when you got in and you checked your computer, you logged on and you watched the body-worn video yourself, is that right?
First off, I read the promise report. I read the description given by the officer who wrote the promise report, which I couldn't make sense of at the time.
Who was the officer who wrote the promise report?
I believe it was written by Chris Ant. And so I've mentioned this at trial. That promise report can be updated, and it's, unless you're an IT guru within the system, you can't tell when it's been edited. So the promise report that I was shown at the trial was not the promise report that I'd seen on the day. So I saw the promise report, and it didn't. I couldn't understand how the incident had occurred. Then I went into the case log and looked at the body-worn footage.
All right. When you looked at the body-worn footage, you saw the incident that had occurred on the 6th of November, involving Kumanjayi Walker and an attempted arrest of him by Senior Constable Hand and Officer Lanyon Smith, correct?
Correct.
At that time, you didn't know either of those officers well?
Not well.
I think you gave evidence that you had done some training exercise with Senior Constable Hand.
Yeah, the yearly defensive tactics requal, he was often on my group.
But he was not someone who was one of your mates?
No,
And he's not someone who you'd had much conversation with at all?
no,
And you didn't know Officer Hand at all?
no, the reverse.
So I beg your pardon, you didn't know Officer Smith at all?
I don't think I'd ever met him. I might have seen him, but no.
And how many times did you watch the body worn on this occasion?
I can't give you a number, but the times that the body worn video has been watched on my account wasn't all me. For example, there was talking back to the fear of professional standards command. There's a fear of getting in trouble for watching body worn video, but as we've seen, you are able to watch body worn video for a number of lawful reasons in regard to the job. But despite that, there are still a number of officers who are too scared to watch it on their accounts but wanted to watch it. I was willing to let them watch it on my account. That'll address some of the high numbers of it being watched, but I don't know how many times I watched it.
I asked you before about rules being broken and what rules you were comfortable breaking, you and other officers. One of the rules you were comfortable breaking was sending body worn video to family members and civilians and other police officers, correct?
Yes.
And filming body worn video on your camera so that you can, on your phone, so that you could be shown back later.
Yes.
Including shown back for a laugh in a way that you conceive was inappropriate.
Yes.
So you say some officers were too scared to watch body worn video legitimately as part of a job, and other officers, including you, felt comfortable actively breaking the rule?
No. So I'm saying that it's not a rule. As part of that memo that you showed me before, there was a number of reasons of why you are able to watch someone else's body worn video. For example, I believe it was training, intel gathering, or, for example, for your own awareness or safety. So watching this body worn video, I believe, falls into that category. Despite it falling into that category, officers amongst the station were still scared of being tracked, of watching other body worn video in case they got in trouble.
So you took leadership on this issue and showed the body worn video yourself, correct?
I showed it to my sergeant, Evan Kelly, and I just allowed people to watch it on my camera, not my camera, on my computer if it was there.
Are you saying that people deliberately used your computer to watch it because they were too scared to open it themselves?
Some did, yes.
Why would they be scared of getting in trouble when it was on the intel sheet and it was nominated as a job to be followed up on?
I don't think, so the intel sheet definitely doesn't say, here's an offender wanted for something, feel free to watch this person's body worn video. If it was that obvious, I'm sure everyone would be happy to watch the body worn video on their computer. I think it just goes into what I've said before about that fear of professional standards command putting the pressure on you, and as Paul Kirkby says, trying to find your breaking point. Police are scared of that pressure. There's a level of fear just from your own organisation in the NT Police.
You didn't have any of that fear though, did you?
Well, I was confident that I was within the rules in that regard, and I was confident in explaining how I was in the rules. If PSC approached me with a please explain.
But even putting aside this particular incident, you, even in circumstances where a judicial officer in the Northern Territory had suggested that you had assaulted somebody and lied in court, you didn't think there'd be any ramifications for you?
In instances where I had done no wrong, yes.
And nobody had spoken to you about excessive use of force?
Not that I can recall.
And there were a number of occasions where you had been given advice about wearing your body worn video and how important it was that you subsequently ignored, correct? That's the thrust of your evidence.
Well, that's about the 15th time that's been put to him. I think we've had enough of that, really, Your Honour.
Well, I don't. I'm going to press the question because it's leading up to another.
Well,
Sure, I think that's conceded, so.
Is that conceded, Mr. Rob?
Yes.
But today you say that there were officers who were concerned that they would get in trouble for watching body-worn video of an incident where police officers had allegedly been assaulted by somebody who was building an axe or a small shed.
Yes.
Have you ever given that explanation before at any time when you were in the trial?
I think I have, if it's not in the transcript. That's been my evidence the complete time. If it didn't get asked in the trial, then it didn't get asked.
You sent a text, you were proactive, I think you just went on to say, in showing that body-worn video footage to your sergeant, Sergeant Coronial?
No, Evan Kelly, I believe.
I see. What conversation did you have with Evan Kelly after you showed him the video?
My evidence would be a lot more. It's the same evidence that I gave in the trial. These are the same answers I've given, but my recollection is worse now. Am I able to utilise my trial evidence?
I'm sure you can do that overnight, but just sitting there, just tell us what is the state of your memory now about any conversation you had with Sergeant Kelly? I'm not trying to trip you up on here, I just wanted to ask you if you've got a memory of it now.
I believe I informed Sergeant Kelly that there was a job that I think he should watch, and that there was a job that seemed to be, it was necessary for it to be passed up the chain of command, and it seemed like it at the time was being downplayed or swept under the rug.
Who was downplaying it or sweeping it under the rug that you were concerned about?
So I think there's been a mistake in thinking that I thought this job was being downplayed or swept under the rug purely from, in the opening statement, it was said by watching the body-worn footage so many times. That's never been my evidence. The evidence was when I put the version of events that was given in the promise report, which is written by the officer who was there. So he gives a version of events of what occurs. He writes a short statement, not a police statement, but he writes a short statement about what occurred. Reading that statement, which is the first thing and the main thing you'll see in the promise job, versus watching the body-worn video, which is at the back of the job, not the forefront. Comparing the two, I thought that was, and the fact that I could not see from that job. Usually you, at the bottom of your statement, you'll see what's been done, what's going to be done. There was nothing like that. There was no police statements have been taken. At that point, no police statements have been taken, as far as I was aware. In fact, Chris Hands wasn't taken until Friday, so it seemed it was an extremely high job. And by that point, the next day, I don't think even police statements had been taken. There was no actions on what was occurring, what was going to occur. So when comparing the two pieces of evidence together, the front of the job being the report, the back of the job being where the evidence would be, like body-worn video and statements if they're uploaded, I compared the two, and that's where I deemed my assessment from.
The evidence you gave at trial was to this effect, that generally when someone assaults a police officer...
What page are you reading?
1038. Generally when someone assaults a police officer, it's signalled through the station in a specific email, but this wasn't. And you thought it should have been, and you were critical of that. Is that right?
I would agree with that, yes.
You then logged into Promise, the police database, and accessed the job number to investigate further what happened?
Yes, I would have. Yeah, so that's what I just talked about. Like, I'm ahead of the game. This is a bit difficult with the... I'm not... Like, I obviously can't remember what order I said everything at the trial.
There were no statements, but you could see the body-worn video of Officers Hand and Smith, and you watched it. You thought to yourself, didn't you, this was obviously a dangerous and volatile situation.
Yes.
So you follow-up. You didn't have a version from Officers Hand and Smith because there were no statements yet?
That's incorrect. As I said, you write on the promise job. I'm sure the police can provide a number of promise jobs that shows the front page you have to write to fill out that box. You have to write what looks like a short statement. So there is a version of events of what occurs. Generally, it'll be a short version. It'll be members this and this, attended this location, this is what occurred, the offender this, did this. So there is a version of events that's given. There was a version of events given, albeit short, and not as detailed as a police statement would end up being.
Okay. In relation to the two officers, you obviously, well, I withdraw that, I'll just ask you, did you speak to either of those officers about what their experience was?
No.
So you had some version of events or short version to go on,
Yes.
and you could watch the body worn video for yourself.
Yes.
And you gave evidence at trial that you formed a view of what they had done.
Yes.
And you said, from your observations, I saw it was a perfect example of a human fear-based reaction. A perfect example of freeze and flight. That's transcript 1039. Is that right?
Yes.
And you still think that today?
Yes.
You had not worked with either of those officers directly, correct?
No.
You had no idea of their service history, correct?
Correct.
You had no idea of their strengths or their capacity in the Aboriginal community at that time?
Correct.
You had no idea of their relationships with the community or the reasons why they had responded in the way that they did?
Correct.
But you were critical of those officers in the way that they responded?
I would say I was...
Well, he's about to answer,
Well-
Mr. Rabbit.
Well, I'm reading this, I've got the transcript in front of me. You've already put to him what he said at trial.
I object to my friend doing this, and I ask that the witness be allowed to answer the question.
Yes, I think it's a reasonable question, and people know what the meaning of critical is.
Your Honour, this is unfair. My client should have the trial transcript in front of him. If he's going to be asked questions about it, he ought to be allowed to refer to it. This is not a memory test as to what you said in
Yeah,
the trial.
we might take a break then if you're on it. Would you mind if we adjourn for the day then and
Then
come back to
he
you?
can, and
I
he'll have
haven't
access
finished-
to the transcript.
I haven't finished my submission.
Sure.
I would ask,
But-
with respect, Your Honour, that he be allowed to have the trial transcript in front of him, and that he be allowed to refer to it, and a learned friend point to it when she's asking questions. I said, this is not a memory test, and I'm concerned that without the transcript, he's going to be asked questions and then going to be taken and said, oh, you said this at the trial. This is unfair. The trial is back in March 2022, this evidence. To be now asked over a year, over 2 years later, what he said is unfair.
He's not being asked what he said.
Well,
He's being asked if he was critical of those officers.
yeah, but let's assume that the answers he was. If it's not in the trial transcript, he's then going to be asked, well, when did you say this at trial? So, he can't win. Whatever answer he gives, he can't win. And it's unfair.
Well, that's the number of
Obviously,
occasions.
the evidence that he gave at trial was in response to the questions asked at trial.
Sure.
So, just pointing out that he did not give this evidence at the trial is not going to be of any assistance, and I'm not going to attach any weight to it, because if he wasn't asked a question, then he didn't have an opportunity.
Well, he shouldn't be
to
asked it
provide.
now.
Well, he can be asked different questions now that weren't asked at the trial.
But this is not an investigation of his evidence at trial.
No,
This is-
he's being asked now to reflect on whether or not he was critical of those police officers at
But-
that time.
And it's all with reference to his trial evidence. And if
No,
to be
it's
referenced
moving
to his,
on. That's a platform to jump from. You've given certain evidence, and now we've got another question.
well,
Were you critical of those police officers?
well, providing it's not tied to his trial evidence, and he's now asked to remember what his views were back in 2019, which is what the cross-examination's all about, then, and not with reference to the trial transcript, then obviously he doesn't need the trial transcript. But if it's going to be tied into, this is what you say today, now where did you say this at the trial? And you said this at the trial and not that, and difference between your evidence now and the evidence at trial. This is not an appropriate forum for that to happen.
Well, it may or may not be, depending on the questions that are asked, but I didn't see any difficulty with the question that Counsel Assisting asked in relation to whether or not Mr. Rolfe was critical of the conduct of the officers in that incident, based on on the information that was available to him at that time.
That's in 2019.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'll accept that question, Your Honour.
You sure you're finished, Mr.
Yes.
Mr. Rolfe, you watched that body worn video yourself, and I put to you a number of questions in relation to Officers Hand and Smith. You've acknowledged you didn't know them, you didn't know about their work history, and you didn't know about their engagement with the Aboriginal community, but you formed a view of them, didn't you? In terms of the way they, I withdraw that, you formed a view of the way they responded to that incident.
Yes.
And you were critical of the way they responded to that incident.
I would say I was critical but very understanding.
Why were you very understanding?
With all the training that I've done a lot more training than a regular police officer in regard to, and I've had a lot of experience in stressful situations. In my experience, I believe most people's reactions to the same event would be the same as those two officers, either flight or fear. It's a very understandable reaction to a life or death event. So from a purely policing, non-human perspective at all, critical on their actions because it, for other reasons, but as far as their reactions as humans, I completely understand it. I believe that.
Sorry, please go on.
Sorry, I just believe that shows that's not so much a them issue. That's more of a training or conditioning issue from the police force, because I think it's a. I think I've said it before. We have an extremely. Our training is too small. 1 day or 2 days, or I don't. They may have changed to 3 days a year now. That is not enough to for a person to change their natural response, because people may have a natural response for flight or fear. 1 or a few days a year will not change that to a different condition.
You were critical of those officers for not shooting Kumanjayi on that instance, is that right?
No.
What did you think they should have done differently?
There's a number of things that they could have done differently.
Like use lethal force was one.
Lethal force, they would have been they would have been justified, I believe.
And that's what you thought they should have done, is that right?
Well, it depends on what they believed at the time. For example, there's been multiple evidence from both parties that said that Kumanjayi raised the axe, but they didn't believe he was going to hit them with it. Correct?
You didn't know that at the time, did you?
Oh, but then there's multiple. So if I'm looking at it and go, if they're in fear for their life, if they're in fear for their partner's life, if that fear passed through them, and that person that they're involved with has the means to, if they believe that person wants to kill them and has the ability to kill them, i.e. with a lethal weapon, their training does say that they can use up to and including lethal force.
You made a judgment of those two officers that they had in fact been in a freeze and flight mode, and you were critical of them for that, weren't you?
As I said before, critical but understanding. That is not an effective reaction to have. That is generally not an effective action to have. I would say never, in order to effect an arrest.
What did you think that they should have done differently if you were critical of them?
I believe they should have arrested Kumanjayi Walker or subdued and neutralised the threat.
How did you think that they could have neutralised the threat at that time?
They could have used their weapons. And then if you look at all the actions on, obviously if I'm sitting there going, what could have happened? If they believed, without me knowing it, if they believed they're in a situation where the weapon was just used to bluff, and they believed that, then I do not see why they couldn't have gone hands-on. If they believed that he wasn't going to use the weapon, which has been said, I don't see any issue with going hands-on, because then the weapon may as well be non-existent. If they believed the weapon wasn't going to be used against them unless they did something that Kumanjayi didn't want them to do, then that changes the situation again. There's endless scenarios that they could have done.
But
But
let's
either
just
way,
get-
we're never trained to... I know it's been called a tactical retreat many times. I'm not a use of force expert. But if you go to any police school in Australia, I believe, this is my honest belief, and if you videotape a use of force instructor teaching a recruit school or a recruit academy how to conduct a tactical retreat, you are not going to see anything like what you saw on that Axe body worn footage.
And you were that's why you were critical of them, because you didn't think they should have done a tactical retreat. You thought that they should have gone hands-on and used a weapon. And by weapon, you mean a gun, don't you?
Well, they definitely could have done a tactical retreat. What I saw, and this is my evidence, and I know it's not agreed with, this is my evidence and my belief, and I'm not going to change it, but that is not a tactical retreat. If you can show me a use of force instructor who is conducting current police training in regard to tactical retreats and show me something that looks similar, I'm open to changing my evidence. My evidence is that is not a tactical retreat. I've never been trained that is a tactical retreat. A tactical retreat would have been a good potential option. There's nothing tactical about what occurred in that video.
Do you have your text messages there?
Yes.
Could you have a look at 547, please?
Yes.
There's a text exchange between yourself and Paddy McCormick.
Yes.
He was a sergeant who was the acting sergeant of the IRT on the 9th of November, wasn't he?
Pardon?
The acting sergeant, acting OIC of the IRT on the 9th of November.
I don't know what his specific role was. I know he was the point of contact. I know there's differing...
Did you think that he was the acting OIC of the IRT?
I would never have thought of that in my head, in my words, using that language.
He was a sergeant who you worked with often in Alice Springs, is that right?
It's sometimes, yes.
Was he one of your mentors?
Yes.
And did you alert him to this job as well as Evan Kelly?
I can't recall.
It's 3:37 p.m. that you text him. Did you start the shift at 3 p.m?
I think he texts me.
Sure, but do you remember what time you started the shift on the 7th of November?
No, I don't.
He texts you saying, "I'm sorry I watched that, fuck me." And he's referring to the body worn video.
So I'm sorry I fucking watched that. Fuck me.
Yes.
Sorry I fucking watched that, fuck me.
Yes.
And he's referring to the body worn video footage.
Yes.
And he's referring to that, isn't he, because you drew it to his attention?
I can't recall. I can't concede that.
You
Not sure.
reply, yeah, and then his response is, you imagine if that other cop got killed and he stood there and watched it with his fucking hands up, what the fuck have we become? And you reply, I know, fuck my whole life. So you're engaging in exchange with that sergeant where you've both been critical of at least one of the police officers there on the ground, correct?
Correct.
And critical because they didn't use a tactical response which involved lethal force.
No, that's not the evidence. Critical because he froze and put his own life and the life of his partner in someone else's hands.
You gave evidence before that you were critical but understanding of these police officers who hadn't had as much tactical training as you. Is that right?
Yes, I would say tactical training and also conditioning, which would be slightly different, but it's the same. Enough training in regard to scenario-based training.
I suggest to you that this text exchange with Sergeant McCormack doesn't sound very understanding. It just sounds critical and mocking of the two officers on the ground dealing with that. What do you say about that?
Oh, I can accept that.
Is that a convenient time to finish?
Yes. Tomorrow it's 9:30.
Thank you.
We'll adjourn till 9:30.
Stand. The order of business.